I'll introduce the topic. I'll say hi to my audience, and then we'll get into it. When Andrew arrives, we'll pull him in. Any questions before we go live?
Nope.
Okay. Well then, once you get your camera up, Dylan, if you turn that on, that'd be ace.
Yep, just give me a second. I'm switching my outputs from my OBS.
Okay. And in that case, we will go live right now. Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Today is a rather more serious discussion and a topic. Last week, has it really been a whole week at this point? I think it has.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, President Zelensky met with President Trump and Vice President Vance in the Oval Office to discuss the signing of a mineral deal. What happened next was chaos. Blame got thrown around. People took up sides on the internet. Zelensky was removed from the White House. He was kicked out. Since then, the U.S. has paused all aid to Ukraine and has cut off intelligence sharing to Ukrainian forces as well. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. The question for tonight is, what should America's involvement or further involvement in Ukraine be? Was President Trump, did he do correct in kicking Zelensky out? Was Zelensky being disrespectful? Is he right to shut off aid? Or should we double down and further support our allies in Ukraine and help them to win the war? We've got some great guests to talk about it tonight. I'm going to give them brief opening statements on this, and I stress it's concise. We have one more coming. When Andrew gets here, I'll pull him in. But for now, let's start. Well, give us your thoughts first, Ukrainian Anna. Tell people who you are and tell people what you think of the situation. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Anastasia. I'm a volunteer from Kharkiv. I do some type of talks every now and then with people about the things. And I'm just pretty much just a regular Ukrainian person with a job as a translator and being a volunteer for the United Ukrainian Armed Forces as well. As far as my opinions go, opinions are shared, I'd say, amongst all, most European people that it was a complete and utter fucking disgrace. And expected, because anyone who had some sort of followed what Trump's campaign about this issue has been, like myself, expected him to pressure us essentially to surrender on the terms of Russia. And if we refuse, he would then blackmail us and pressure us with the restriction of aid. I didn't expect extortion, though. That was kind of, spicy on his part. But other than that, it kind of went down exactly how I expected it to be. And now we are at the situation that one guarantor of our security back at Budapest Memorandum days is invading us and trying to destroy our nation. And the other one is now abandoned us or maybe even is assisting Russia. At the very least, seems to be more of an ally to Russia than it is to us. As far as the fallout out of this goes, nothing we can do, really. It's up to the United States at the end of the day to decide whether they want to aid us or not. It's up to them whether they want to uphold their insurances or their standing in the world as the leader of the West, right? Like I said, not much we can do about it. Our goal is clear. We want security guarantees. We don't want to be backstabbed and fucked over like we used to be. Not only Ukraine, by the way, a lot of Eastern European countries relate to that. And we only hope that Europe, it's the last wake-up call, okay? They had bajillion wake-up calls, and maybe that's the last one, and they will finally see that we are the defenders of Europe, and they will invest in that appropriately, which frankly, they should, because it's, we are on the same continent and it's them primarily that we are defending. So us first, obviously, them second. So yeah, that's my take pretty much. I only hope that Europe, gets its shit together. Other than that, I just want United States to at least not assist Russia. Okay, at least give us there something. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for your perspective, and we will get into it as we go throughout this debate. Non-smoker, you're up.
Hey everyone, twitch.tv/non_smoker. Yeah, so it's kind of awkward being on the same side as Trump. I don't like Trump. I didn't vote for Trump. I don't support Trump. And to be honest, the way that Trump and Vance conducted themselves at the press conference, I thought was embarrassing. It's, a really ugly display of their lack of diplomatic skill. The whole thing was really uncomfortable. But all that being said, I mean, I've been consistent every time I talk about this conflict since the start. I've always argued that this is really nothing more for the U.S. anyway than a proxy war with Russia. And I always sort of felt like it was a fool's errand because it really depended on, the expectation was, let's deplete Russia's military capacity as much as we can. And then when it's advantageous for us, we're just going to pull out of this conflict and whatever happens to Ukraine happens. I always thought that it would be better for Ukraine to reach a settlement with Russia early in the conflict, which they tried to do until Boris Johnson urged them not to. With that, we've basically given them offloaded older weapons, subsidized weapons manufacturers here to make new weapons. And the only thing we really have to show for our end of things in terms of achieving our war aims is lots of dead Russians. And, that's really it, right? Russia continues to churn along pretty smoothly as a war machine. In fact, they've probably done more to deplete our military capacity at this point than we have theirs. I think the whole thing is a real tragedy. I don't feel good about the fact that this is happening to Ukraine, but I do feel kind of vindicated in the fact that I said all along that this was going to happen. We do this consistently and constantly. We create proxies and develop them, and then we fucking rug pull them when it's advantageous for us to do so. So, that's basically my whole argument here.
Okay. Well, we will get into it as we go. Dylan, tell people who you are and what your thoughts are.
Sure, my name's Dylan. I'm one of Zelensky's thugs. So I think the meeting itself is just classic Trump. This is how he's behaved ever since he was on The Apprentice. So there's nothing about Trump's behavior during that meeting that specifically surprised me around him, or the fact that J.D. Vance was dancing like a monkey to brown nose for him, in front of him, try to get on his good side, tag team Zelensky, or that for somehow Russian state TV got in the room, or that the types of questions he's being asked is why aren't you wearing a suit, Zelensky, when we're trying to take this war seriously, supposedly. Not to mention, just the thing that gets me about Zelensky being disrespectful is the area of disrespect is the fact that Zelensky asked a pretty legitimate question of, the Russians have violated these security arrangements so many times when we made them, Minsk 1, Minsk 2. How do we make it so it doesn't happen again? And the reaction was, why aren't you saying thank you? The reason they're reacting that way is because they don't have an answer. There's a giant gaping hole in Trump's peace plan that stops it from being a peace plan outside of a temporary ceasefire. And until that's settled, then it's not a peace plan. Then it's just something to make him feel good. And so when I see them react that way to a very basic question that anybody who's trying to find a long-term solution to this would have to answer, how do you stop the Russians from invading again? His only response is, me and Putin, we have a close relationship. We're close, we're friendly. He knows me and I know him. He respects me. But let's say for a moment that was true. Let's say for a moment that somehow that we were all naive enough to believe that their personal friendship is somehow more important than the geopolitical forces that dictate statecraft. What happens when Trump isn't president anymore in 4 years, and it's been 5 years? What then, when somebody else gets elected? You need to make arrangements that can stand the test of time past one administration. It's the same problem where if you exit every treaty, once you go from one administration to the next, nobody's going to think you're credible, right? And Trump is the king of crushing American credibility. As for what the United States should do at this point, I think that. Well, I don't know how much we're going to talk about like military logistics in this conversation. Nobody in this room is a military expert, so I'm not going to take anybody's in this room's like commentary seriously about like depleting military resources, and because nobody in here knows. But if we're going to have that conversation, since it was brought up just briefly, the Russians have lost 50 to 60% of their tank arsenal. I see them using tanks from the Stalin era to charge frontline positions. Their infantry are now doing motorcycle assaults, coast guard assaults with Chinese golf carts. Like, these are not things a modern nation state does with its armed forces. If its military is being run efficiently, they have enough supplies, and they're not under immense pressure. And we hear complaints from Russian soldiers and Russian divisions across the front about manpower shortages, as they have yet to make difficult political decisions around mobilization that Putin knows could threaten his regime. So I think that my problem isn't that, oh my God, we're talking to the Russians. My problem isn't that, oh my God, we could be aiming towards a peace deal. My problem is we have cards, we choose not to use them, give up everything in negotiations, and undercut the Ukrainians. If we really want to end the war and we care about the suffering of civilians, we wouldn't be, say, ending intelligence sharing to show the missiles hitting children's hospitals, or trying to deport 240,000 Ukrainian refugees back to a war zone. We would be trying to make it so the Russians are compelled to come to the negotiating table instead of compelling the Ukrainians to set them up for failure later. Also, the Boris Johnson peace deal thing is all just bullshit. It's been debunked bullshit for over 2 years. If you haven't learned that yet, then you're never going to learn it.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and appreciate your thoughts. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go. Last but certainly not least, Lactoid.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I voted for Trump in 2014 for the first time ever was because he was the only one talking about making serious proposals to end this war. You've heard the Democrats say on the opposition that they're willing to fund this as long as it takes. They aren't being as reasonable as Trump is when it comes to identifying the reality on the battlefield and the reality of the US economy. Here we have a conflict with likely over 1 million killed or wounded, hundreds of thousands dead, and it needs to end. Neither Russia nor Ukraine, as state actors, are necessarily the undisputed good guys in this conflict. Sure, there are critiques you can levy at Russia, but there are also critiques you can levy at Ukraine that we in the West just tend to ignore. This is not some David versus Goliath. This is two problematic governments throwing young men to their deaths, and it needs to stop. Trump's negotiation will save us money and, more importantly, human lives. I think pausing aid until a peace negotiation date is planned, which is what the proposal is, makes perfect sense in order to get Ukraine to get real in terms of actually resolving this conflict.
Okay. Well, with that, Andrew isn't here yet. I hope he's okay. So let's just go to the open section of the discussion. Lots been said. I guess the first question I have for the pro-Ukrainian side here, so Dylan and Anna, at what point does Ukraine need to come to the table?
When there's terms that are just enough to come to the table. I mean, when the terms could dictate a lasting peace. You don't come to the table if the terms are start the war again in 5 years. Then you're just saying, I don't want to fight. I want my kids to fight.
I could provide a little bit of a longer answer. We can come right now, honestly, but only if there was something to come to. We can surrender on our own without giving, I don't know, half our rare earth minerals to United States. Like, we can just surrender right now. That's the terms. Putin's terms are essentially recognize all the occupied territories. It is no NATO for Ukraine, no security guarantees, reduction of our army, reduction of our arms, and change of government, blah, 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 right? So all of that Trump wants to give him no concessions from Russia, all concessions from our side, and we can just go to Kremlin and do the exact same thing without United States negotiating anything. So in our sense, it just doesn't make any fucking sense to negotiate anything with this administration, because they're not, despite being like the guarantors, quote unquote, of our security, as it should be Russia, UK and the United States. It's really, they are assuring our surrender, I guess. but I mean, we don't need that. And what we do need is not to be fucked over again. So that's why our president tried to basically present at the Oval Office that Ukrainians are not going to be satisfied with just assurances, because assurances from United States mean shit. They don't mean anything. That you can wipe your ass with them, just like you can wipe your ass with any Russian ceasefire or negotiation. So yeah, that's basically our whole deal. It's not about not negotiating. Most people in Ukraine support negotiations. They don't support surrender. They don't support negotiations without Ukraine, between the United States and Russia, and they most certainly do not support ceding everything to Russia. So yeah, that's my take, I suppose.
Any response from the other side?
I mean,
Yeah.
you can go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find it always confusing when we enter these debates because there seems to be this, like, I don't know, double speak kind of going on, or maybe I'm misunderstanding. It's like, well, we really rely on U.S. aid. It's crucial for us in fighting this war, but we also don't really need it. And we can fight for ourselves. And it's like, honestly, I believe Ukraine, as a country with sovereignty, has every right to defend itself. I don't think they should be forced to surrender or forced to unfair terms either. But I think the U.S., as Anna said, I mean, is totally within its right to withdraw aid, military aid, to Ukraine if we deem it too expensive and a waste of money, which is exactly what's happening right now. It's been, I mean, I know the numbers are always disputed, but it's at least nearly $200 billion in military aid. Those are the numbers that I'm working with anyway. And it doesn't appear that in the last 2 years, at least, there's been any significant territorial movements, at least not in the positive for Ukraine. Looks like lots of people dying and suffering in a war that ultimately, if it's not a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia, then when the U.S. pulls out, the war can settle itself on its own. Ukraine can, battle off the Russians, and they can settle that, on their own terms. But yeah, I don't really get that. And I do kind of want to push back on a couple of things Dylan said. I mean, while I admit I'm not a military expert, neither are you. And in addition to that, I'm just basing this off of data that I've read, that NATO and NATO generals have basically acknowledged the fact that Russia is outpacing NATO and the U.S. together in terms of military production, in terms of the total number of items produced that can be accounted for. And in addition to that, I don't think that the negotiations with Boris Johnson, or being wrecked by Boris Johnson, is some fucking made-up absurd conspiracy theory. I'd love to hear your argument on that.
I mean, you can continue to
It is.
believe
What's your argument? What's your argument?
I think I've told you this before. I don't know if you just forgot. But
maybe I forgot. Let's hear it again.
Okay. Well, first, let's talk about the military. You're right. I'm not a general. You're not a general. I'm just saying that nobody should take anybody, including me, too seriously when it comes to we're going to take the army and we'll march that way and that'll lead to this victory, or they have this much depletion. But what I can say is that we do know that Russia has lost the majority of their tank fleet. We do know that they can't really replenish the losses that they are taking. And we do know that roughly 40 to 50% of their artillery shells come from North Korea. And if 40, 50% of your artillery shells is coming from a slave state that has to run its factories 24/7, 7 days a week, then it's going to be kind of difficult to say I can compete against the West entirely on my own when it comes to production, and we can fight the entirety of this 1 billion strong alliance with our production alone. I'm calling bullshit on that, because if that was the case, they would have already won the war. And they haven't won the war, which indicates that the official statistics, maybe that you're reading from the Russians or whatever statistic you're putting out, that are saying that, oh no, they're actually able to build up their fleet and they're more powerful than the West now. The West is actually weaker. The Russians are more powerful now. I mean, you can believe that, but they've lost the majority of their tank fleet, the majority of their armor. Most of their artillery is coming from the North Koreans. They have to be reinforced by North Korean troops. They've fired the majority of, I mean, holy fuck, dude. Where do you want to start? But so putting that aside, we can move on to, you want to go there? Or
well,
yeah,
no, I think it's important. No, I think it's important. We could get to the Boris Johnson thing too, but just so we're clear, the source here is Le Monde, and they're quoting Christopher Cavoli, who's the commander of U.S. European Command.
And he
And
is
according to
saying that they
Cavoli,
are able to
well,
regenerate.
let me hold on. What he's saying is Russia is on track to produce or refurbish over 1,200 new main battle tanks a year, and to manufacture at least 3 million artillery shells or
Yeah,
rockets
listen to
per
that.
year.
Listen to that.
Over,
You missed
hold
it.
on,
You
over
missed it. You
triple.
missed
Listen,
it. You
over
don't know what you're
triple the
saying.
amount the U.S. estimated at the beginning of
Refurbish.
the
What does
war.
refurbish mean? What does
I know
refurbish mean?
it means repairing, but it says
Yes,
produce
that
or
wait.
refurbish.
80 to 90% of that is
Produce
refurbishment.
or
Wait, but
well,
please,
wait.
please be
Where's your
quiet. You don't know
source
what
on
you're
that?
talking about.
Where's your source on that?
Fucking
Where's your
clueless.
source on that?
You're so fucking clueless. The majority
Where's your
of these.
source on that?
Where's the
Where's
tank?
your source on
Hold
that?
hold on. Let Dylan
Everybody,
tell
There's
us.
no
wait,
source on that.
Hey,
this isn't an.
non-smoker,
You didn't let me finish.
Give Dylan a chance
Non-smoker.
to
There's
tell us.
no source on that.
Christ. Wait, can you get people who are like a little bit more knowledgeable on that
So
side next time?
triggered.
Make this a
Holy
little bit
shit.
more
What
of
a
a challenge.
fucking pussy. You don't
Can
have
you
any
make him shut
fucking
up so I
source.
can describe what
Okay.
refurbishment
I
is?
want
He
to
doesn't
hear
know what
what
he's talking
Dylan has
about,
to say
or-
real quick. I'll let you
Okay.
go after that.
The
I
majority of the
promise you,
tanks
non-smoker.
that are being refurbished, okay, are coming from old Soviet stockpiles. These are not new tanks being built, which means that there's a limit. You can't endlessly pull from Soviet stockpiles because the Soviet Union's dead and they're not producing tanks anymore. And that's why when I talk about them using Stalin-era tanks on the front line, the reason they're doing that isn't because, oh my God, we're producing so many tanks and the reason they're doing that is they have to go further and further and further back into the reserves to keep up the inhuman type of offensives that they're carrying out all across the front line. Which means that saying that, oh my gosh, look, they're producing 1,200. What matters is how much of that is new battle tanks. Because if they're taking old T-54s out of storage instead of producing new T-90s, if Stalin saw that tank, okay, that's not impressive to me.
Yeah, just so we're clear, you don't have a source on it being 90% refurbished things?
I said it's 70 to 80% refurbishment.
But you don't
Do you
have
want
a
to find?
source
You
on
want me to
that,
find
just so
any
we're
source
clear.
on the?
I would
can tell
love
you the
that, yes.
majority, 70 to 80%. I can tell you.
You
is,
just find me a source. That's all I
Well,
need.
number one, you can use Perun. He's an open source researcher, has found this data before, but there's others as well. I'm pretty sure even Western sources, I'm pretty sure pretty much like Russian sources acknowledge this. I mean, it's easier to take an old tank and update it and put it out than to produce brand new T-90s. Just look at the casualties on the front line. 10 to maybe 5% of them are T-90 tanks. The majority of them are going to be older tanks that they've taken out of storage. This isn't like a debatable point. This is like well known. You can see it from the casualties on the front. When I go to the front line, all the tanks I see are old Soviet gear. I've seen only one T-80 in the entirety of my time on Ukraine, destroyed or in service. Right? They are using mostly old shit. So saying, oh look, they're refurbishing all this old stuff. Okay, if you have 10,000 old cars and you're refurbishing all these old cars, and 80 or 60 or any majority of that is going to be old cars, you're going to run out. You're going to run out of these old cars.
Yeah, so just so we're clear, even if you're correct on the tanks, you're not factoring in artillery.
Not
Yeah,
it's
50% of it coming from North Korea.
Just real quick,
Move
hey,
on from
gang,
tanks.
listen, just real quick. I just get the order of operations here. So non-smoker, I'll let you respond. You
I got a
respond to that,
response
but
as
then
well.
then Anna wants in.
I
and
never
then
got to talk about
Blackwood, and then
Boris. He said I lied about the Boris thing, and I had to discuss
We'll get-
that.
I can
We'll get
address
to-
more things, but
Okay.
you
Yeah.
were it doesn't.
Finish your response,
Yeah.
non-smoker, and
Just
then
so
we're
we're
gonna go
clear.
Anna, Blackwood, Andrew.
Yeah, just so we're clear, even if I accept what you're saying, everything you're saying at face value, which I have no reason to, but I'll give you the benefit of the doubt here, okay? It's 90% refurbished Soviet tanks that are falling apart as they're being operated, and 50% of these shells are North Korean made in slave labor, and it's this horrible thing. It's still more than the US and all NATO allies combined, and it's three times what they thought the Russians would be able to produce per year at the start of the conflict. And my only argument here is that Russian military production, whether it's supplemented by North Korea and old Soviet hardware or not, is still far greater than what we projected it to be, one, and it's not slowing down. So the assumption that we're just depleting Russia's military capacity, which was the goal of this war, at least in part, if you listen to Mitch McConnell, if you listen to Lindsey Graham, if you listen to all of these people in our government who argue as to why we need to support Ukraine, a big part of it is depleting Russia's military capacity. It's not fucking working.
But it's happened. You can't say that and then see the tanks that they're putting out there. If it's true that they're refurbishing a lot more tanks than we thought they would, but the quicker burning through of their stockpile is not something to brag about. If they're losing tanks at a much faster rate, that they have to keep refurbishing them. They're burning through
if they were burning through their stockpile,
thought.
why would the number of tanks refurbished or produced
Because
not
they have
change?
to refurbish more because they keep blowing up. What do you mean? Okay,
let's
look.
give it to Anna.
Okay, this is the last thing I'll say because wait. Come on, let me just say about the Boris Johnson thing, okay? Just
Okay.
quick. I have to. If he says I lied or he asked me to talk, I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
I never
have
said you
never
lied.
responded.
Quickly.
Okay, but let me. You said that I wasn't right about that, or that you
I
needed me to
disagree with
explain
you. Yeah,
myself. Okay,
I
fine.
never called you a
Anna can
liar.
talk.
I disagree.
Anna can talk. I'll talk about it later.
Okay, Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, also, Boris Johnson thing is like a beaten horse at this point. Boris Johnson was the most popular guy in Ukraine, by the way, because he came to support us. He said that he really doesn't think that you can negotiate with Putin. That's it. That's all he said. There's like literally nothing else. The Ukrainian decision to stop the negotiations, however, came about 2 weeks prior because of the Bucha, or what we discovered, the massacre in Bucha. And that pretty much almost entirely destroyed amongst the population the desire to have any negotiations. And it reflected, obviously, upon the government as well. And for example, Naftali Bennett, or whatever the fuck that guy's name is, from Israel, he also came here and said, like, yeah, I don't think like the Ukrainians can negotiate with Putin at this point. So, it's a retarded point. It has been.
But no, it's
Wait.
not. Actually, you're totally disputing
Hold on,
Naftali
let her
Bennett's
finish.
own
Let
words.
Anna finish, then you can respond to her. I promise.
That's one thing I addressed it bajillion times. I don't care. What I do care about is the good point you brought up. The good point you brought up is the double speak you said. Like what's if you say like you don't need, and we never said we don't need United States. United States, 65 million in particular of military aid helped us a lot. It's really, especially with the anti-air. So, for example, all of our batteries. I'm talking to you, non-smoker, by the way. All of our batteries have been basically United States, right? So all of our like Patriot systems, which we have like 3, so it doesn't really like matter in that great scheme of things. But HIMARS helped insanely. It helped a lot on the front. A lot of that was United States. Intelligence of United States helped tremendously to prevent massive strikes, to know where they are. All of that helped tremendously. But it doesn't mean that if United States stops that, the war will stop and we will stop, because like you said, we're not a proxy war. If we were, we would stop. But we're not. So because of that, we are losing our sponsor and we're losing our supposed security guarantor by the Budapest Memorandum situation. But we'll just have a lot more casualties. We'll have a lot more death. We will have a lot more hardship. Probably we'll lose more territory. That's all of that's true. But so it's not a double speak. It is both things. On one end, they were incredibly helpful to us, United States, but at the same time, without them doesn't mean the war effort stops. And I don't see the problem you pointed out, to be honest.
Okay, I want to give a brief response to that, non-smoker. Then I want to go to Lactoid because Lactoid's been waiting a while.
Yeah, I'll keep it really focused. But you're contradicting Naftali Bennett's own words. Naftali Bennett said that the ceasefire seemed possible before Western powers intervened. He said that in like a 5-hour interview on his YouTube channel or on a YouTube channel somewhere.
Yes, but he then added that
Ukrainska Pravda disputes what you're saying. Or sorry, Ukrainska Pravda. I know I'm pronouncing that
No,
terribly.
I've heard that
but,
source before.
Yeah.
You don't know your own source, buddy. But
Yeah, it
So,
does.
but I don't understand the issue with the source. Explain it to me.
The Ukrainska Pravda. Okay. Also, let's skip the whole source. Let's go straight to the point. The agreement's public, right? You know the agreement's public. The agreement they debated.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm aware.
Okay. So let's skip all of the nonsense and just get straight to the point. What do you think a Ukrainian leader might have a problem with an agreement that says that the army that they're allowed to have has to be like 1/4 the size of the army they currently have, which beat off the Russian invasion at the start of the war after Russia invaded them while saying they wouldn't, twice in the last decade. It seems like the type of thing you would do if you didn't want your country to exist, or if you wanted peace in your country to mean being peace of another country.
Any chance of that
I would
also
say
fell apart after Bucha discovery, which, by the way, Naftali Bennett says, next sentence after what you said, he says that if there was any possibility of the negotiations, it completely fell off after the liberation of Kiev region upwards, right, in the north. So you're just skipping the next sentence, basically, is what you're doing.
Just as to answer Dylan's question or statement or whatever, I would. No, I'll shut up. I'll promise. I would have just went with any agreement that would lead to less Ukrainians dying. That would just be my approach, though. I don't know.
Okay.
Wow,
Lactoid.
so cool.
So brave.
Oh boy, that's what we got. Okay.
I got a couple things here. So first of all, Dylan, with all respect, I think there was a little bit of hypocrisy going on. You start off by saying that we're not experts on this, and so we're not really somebody that you should listen to. And then you admit that you're also not an expert, but then go into very specifics about tank losses, about very specific weapons.
Well, because I
industry.
still know more than
And,
you guys.
well,
I mean, come on.
there's just a lot of evidence out there that there's a lot of problems the Ukrainian military is facing, especially when it comes to manpower issues from the IISS,
Yeah.
and also our administration and intel is indicating that there's a massive manpower issue in Ukraine. There's a reason why they're having to pull up in vans and grab people off the street to ship them to the front
No,
line.
fuck
It's because
you,
they're
dude.
having difficulty getting enough people to actually go and want to die at the front lines. And let's not even mentioning the territory losses that Ukraine has been experiencing. Those have been ramping up over the past year. They were especially bad at the end of last year, but you're seeing them again during this first quarter as well. I think there's also a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too that's happening here, where Russia's getting wrecked. They're just getting destroyed. They're incompetent. They can't handle warfare. But also they are this incredible threat to NATO, and they're going to invade NATO and destroy all of NATO. And they pose this incredible threat to NATO. And the way we can prevent that is by having Ukraine join NATO, because Russia will never touch a NATO country. Well, will they never touch a NATO country, or will they destroy all of NATO with their incredibly powerful military or their incredibly weak military that always loses and is entirely incompetent? The Zelensky peace plan, unless it's been updated as of today, is completely unfeasible. I mean, you have demands for Crimea back. You have demands for reparations, a complete withdrawal of all military assets in Ukraine. It's completely unworkable. And that's not even factoring in that Zelensky in 2022 signed a declaration indicating that he's not even allowed to negotiate with Putin. That definitely slows down the peace negotiations. And I think that's part of the reason here why, well, you have somebody with this crazy peace plan being proposed, and they're a complete refusal to negotiate with the head of state of the other side. You have to get them to get real. When it comes to this kind of negotiation. Otherwise, they're not. Otherwise, they're just going to believe that they're going to rely on the U.S. to fund them into eternity and throw as many bodies into the meat grinder as they want to.
Okay, so that was directed towards
You
me.
can
I
respond.
think.
Once you respond, we're going to toss it to Andrew so he can.
Got you. I'll just go through what he said. I won't even go because there's some stuff earlier he said I want to respond to, but I'll just get through this. First, the draft. It's true. During World War II, 62% of the boys that we sent over there, we took off the street, drafted, and sent over there. In wars like this, the draft is a sad, sad part of war. The Russians have also mobilized people into the armed forces, and they're facing a massive manpower shortage as well. Now, they could mobilize more people, but Putin has not, because the only time his approval rating has really taken a strong hit was when he did the first wave of mobilization, and that's due to Russian numbers, not Western numbers, Russian numbers, which is why he hasn't done it, even though it would help his war effort. And so when we say, oh, Ukraine has a manpower issue, yes, so does Russia. The fact that they're putting like $25,000 or $30,000, crazy payments, first-time down payments for new recruits, that indicates to me that they're spending more and more and more because it's getting harder and harder to convince people to duck and take cover when the drones come for you, because it's a scary fucking war. So it is true that Ukraine has a manpower issue. So does Russia, because even the Russians know, like, your money means nothing if you're dead. So yes, we should acknowledge the manpower issue, but this is my whole point when it comes to negotiating. We negotiate with under the understanding that Russia also has a manpower issue. They're having troubles getting people to go agree. Did you know at the end of 2024, the average age for a new Russian volunteer was 50 years old? 50 years old. That's fucking insane. And we're not going to pretend that that shows some level of weakness that we could take advantage of at the negotiating table, certainly before we give everything up in advance. In this other idea of like the hypocrisy of Russia's so pathetic, but Russia's so powerful. Let me give you an historical example, okay? Let me be a bit of a story. Finland. We'll all, I think, acknowledge in here that the first Soviet invasion of Finland was probably not the most well-managed military invasion in human history, right? Came with a lot of errors, a lot of problems with strategic planning, a lot of overconfidence, and they underestimated the Finns, and that led to a disastrous outcome. Later, though, through trial and error, due to the fact that they have many more lives to play with, and so they can kind of go through trial and error a lot more, and a bunch of other factors, they continue to work at it, and eventually they were able to still get some dominance over the Finns while the Finns retained their independence even after that fucked up invasion, because they went through trial and error, and learned and got better. And so my point is, if somebody's fucked up at the start of the war, you don't give them 3 to 4 to 5 years to recover, figure out what they're doing, and then be better at it. And we see that the Russians are engaging in sabotage attacks across Europe. They're trying to blow up railways in Poland using refugees. They're trying to do arson attacks in Canada. They're blowing up manufacturing facilities in the Czech Republic. They're engaged in industrial sabotage and the infiltration of European elections. an aggression against Europe isn't just seen through military aggression, is also seen through the dividing of the internals of the state, like how the Russians tried to support the Black Lives Matter movement and the Blue Lives Matter movement at the same time in America. So, yeah, the Russians right now aren't the biggest military threat in the world compared to, I don't know, like fucking the most powerful army on the planet, but they're getting better. Every day they continue to improve, and they'll continue to improve, and it's not like their ambitions have changed. Do we really think if we give the Russians 5 to 6 years to figure out how they fucked up and get better, that they're just going to use it to rest on their laurels and stay the same and be lazy? I don't view the Russians as lazy. I view them as people who work very hard to conquer others.
I think there's a problem already, though, with what you said, because if the idea is they've gotten better at it, right, over and over again, they've gotten better at it to the point where they pose some threat to NATO countries, then what is Ukraine at this point, now that the Russians are so good at it, what is Ukraine joining
We
NATO to
also
get us?
get it better.
What is? Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
If Russia is a threat to NATO countries, this idea that people have that as soon as they're done with Ukraine, they're going to take all of Ukraine, which is not going to happen. They're going to take all of Ukraine, and then they're going to start pushing into NATO countries. And the reason why they're able to push into NATO countries,
they're going to take
I've been talking to people.
NATO
They're saying
countries.
Poland. They're saying they're coming into France. I mean,
in the future, yes, in the future, but not now. Not now.
Yeah, but
they don't have to do it physically.
Never going to happen.
Moldova.
They don't even have to do it militarily.
Moldova is the last country. Moldova is the last country before you hit NATO.
We are biggest army in Europe right now. That's why you need us in NATO. We also are the biggest drone operators in the world right now, with Russia as well. Unfortunately, they also have drones, but we are not joining NATO, not Europe anytime soon. Russia, I suppose. So we have the insane amount of experience that we are now, by the way, sharing with NATO people within the bases. And we're teaching people as well how to operate drones, how to navigate drone warfare, because this is the war of drones and artillery. By the way, it's not the war of tanks. So when it comes to this, we have a lot to offer to actual NATO and Europe as well.
With all due respect, this isn't really addressing what I was saying, though. What I'm saying is, if Russia
you say, why do we need you in NATO? Why you said why you need Ukraine in NATO? That's why.
No. I said what I'm saying. I'm not talking about like whether or not Ukraine has a military that can function. Of course it does, right? What I'm saying is that there is this perception of Russia where not only are we you guys talking about how incompetent they are and how many losses they've had and how they're on the brink of defeat.
That's America.
A lumbering giant.
They're also going to conquer Europe.
Hold on, when all the empirics appear to indicate otherwise.
This isn't new.
Okay, wait. Simultaneously have this powerhouse that's like, as soon as they're done with Ukraine, they're so good at warfare now that they're going to be able to invade NATO. My question to you is, if they're good enough, hold on, if they're good enough to invade NATO at this point, because they're so practiced and so good.
I didn't say right now, but okay.
No, not right now.
Well, hold on. Let him finish his question, then Anna can respond. Then
okay.
We're gonna get Andrew in. I promise.
We gotta get Andrew in. Yeah. Sure.
I'm gonna go smoke a joint, Wick.
Whether it be right now, whether it be
I'm gonna go smoke,
or whenever you think that hopefully this war will end soon. I don't know how long you guys want it to go for, but when there's like a contradiction here of there's this pathetic military power that also poses a threat to NATO to the point where it's going to invade NATO, which is why we need Ukraine to join NATO, because that's the way you stop them from invading. Well, so either they're military, like they're so good at fighting now, like they got with the Finnish, that they're able to defeat NATO, in which case Ukraine joining NATO doesn't do anything for them since they have these plans anyway.
I got what you're saying. Let me explain. So first of all, they aren't extraordinary well at the fighting, as you can see. They cannot really, move to get their aims. But they're also severely underprepared and very faulty at the beginning of the invasion. Kind of similar thing that happened with Chechnya. I don't know how much you know about that conflict, but first Chechen war, they basically lost. They lost insane amount of equipment, insane amount of people. They couldn't accomplish any of their aims. So what they did is that they got a ceasefire deal, a peace, as Russians do. And in 4-year time, they attacked again, much better prepared, knowing the strong points and the weak points of their enemy, and they succeeded second time. So this is what we are trying to avoid as much as we can in Ukraine. Which about the NATO thing is that if you listen to Russian people, for example, to Russian officials, what they say, they will tell you. They say that what they need from Ukraine is human resource. What they need from Ukraine is resource to mobilize, because most of the common Russian practices is to not mobilize people from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, but mobilize people from the poor, like marginalized parts of the country, like Asia parts. People that regular Russians really don't care about dying. So that's kind of what they do. They want to use us as a resource, which much like Germans, for example, used Slovaks when they occupied Czechoslovakia to then invade Poland. And this is like a very common strategy. We have a lot of people. We're a big country, not compared to you, but compared to many other European countries in terms of the population. We have massive amounts of weapons now. We also have massive amount of experience as well. So yeah, they are mobilized. Most people from Donbass, like I recently just talked with my very close friend from Donbass, soldier who is at the front currently, and he said like there's like no man in Donbass at this point, because most of them Russia mobilizes and throws at us, right? So this is just a thing they do strategically. They also can use Moldova, they can use Armenia, Belarus, countries that are not currently in NATO, Georgia, countries that they already have precedents of invading and annexing territories. And after that, with all of that, they have a much, much, much better strategic positioning to attack, let's say, Baltic.
Okay, just real quick.
I would like to respond to this.
I understand.
pretty much.
Real quick for housekeeping. I will get to super chats at the top of the hour.
Andrew
So
probably wants to
giving me
say something.
Yeah, and Andrew does want to say something.
I'd like to respond to that though, real quick.
I
think there's again another problem here when we're playing up all the men and like manpower issues and material loss that Russia is experiencing, and then also insinuating that they have this goal where they're going to use the occupied territories like Crimea and
it's not the insinuation, they say
and then use them in order to be able to conquer NATO. I think it's ridiculous. I think that Russia, even if they had all of Ukraine, which they're not going to get, but even if they had all of Ukraine, aren't going to touch NATO. There's very specific reasons why they're not going to touch NATO. The reason why this rhetoric is being played up is because it's trying to secure Western funding for Ukraine, right? And one of the ways you can
guarantees
one of the ways
they're
you can
not
get
gonna
Western
attack us
real quick, one of the ways you can get Westerners to like fork over money is if you make them feel afraid. Next, the Russians are coming for you. But the reality is they're not. They're not going to be going for any NATO country. It's ridiculous.
Except for the bombing, the arson attacks, and the railroads they're blowing up, and the assassinations, and the attempts to manipulate our democracies and buying a politician. Except for all that, they're not doing anything.
Andrew,
They do
that stuff because they're not going to engage us in a war.
They just did invasion 3 years ago.
Okay, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're all in. You've been hearing. You're caught up with the conversation.
Yep.
Go ahead. What's your thoughts?
Not much has changed in the opposition argument for the past 3 years. It's like just rehashing the same arguments over and over again, which is just like war is bad. People dying is bad. But then they don't actually admit to the point of like, it's such a child's take. It's like literally like level 1 tutorial.
Yeah, what a childish thing to think.
Yeah, it is, because it's devoid of the nuance. It's devoid of the facts of what's actually happening within Ukraine. So when you minimize Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's just war is bad and people are dying is bad. It does nothing to the people that are actually suffering and dying at the hands of the Russian war machine. And especially when you're not even arguing for security guarantees for Ukraine so that will stop in the future. You are doing nothing for that. It's a nothing argument. Anyways, Russia's military power. Their military power adapts over time, right? They learn over time and they get better as time goes on. So it's not a problem. It's not an issue right now. By the way, I'm a 10-year Army veteran. Shout out to Wick. I know you're a veteran too. 88 Mike motor transport operator, was deployed to the Middle East for 9 months in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. So I can speak a little bit on military stuff, but that's not really what we're focused on, because Russia fights with information. They fight informational warfare. Hello, they just gave millions of dollars to Tenet Media, which just disseminated lies to Trump supporters and MAGA media to lie about what's happening within Ukraine. That just happened. Like, we just found that out last year. Russia is destabilizing Western countries from within. We're fighting ourselves. Russia doesn't have to even bring military equipment to NATO countries when we're going to defeat each other, and then Russia's going to do the fucking dance right over our countries immediately afterwards. Okay, that is the actual fear. So it's a future issue in terms of military and like the Russian military coming across the border to kill people. But they're actively working against that right now. They're actively working to further that future thing that we're afraid of, actually, because it is a legitimate fear to have. Weird, because they've only done it throughout my entire lifetime, twice in Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine twice, Belarus. They have troops in fucking Moldova. This is just a constant problem. But for some reason, the people that stand up and support Ukraine are like, hey, this is wrong. Russia's consistent invasions need to end. Oh, war bad. Hey, Ukraine, stop defending yourself. Hey, how about if you ever get attacked by someone, I'm going to have a third person show up and tell them, hey, stop defending yourself. Stop defending yourself. Allow that person to attack you. If you defend yourself, you're just going to further the attacks. You're just going to make the fighting happen, and people are just going to throw fists at each other the whole time. It's like the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is not a bar fight. It is not something where you're having a nuance outside the bar, and or you're having a nuisance outside of the bar, and you just need it to go away because it's inhibiting your business. It's inhibiting your place of business. That's not what this is. Russia is trying to absolutely eliminate the entire Ukrainian identity. They're doing it. They're destroying churches. They're destroying their cultural sites. They're destroying their history. They're trying to remove their language, actually, counter to the Russian propaganda of like the Ukrainians are trying to remove the Russian name. Well, I went to Kharkiv, which is where Anna lives. I was like, what is this? This is not Ukrainian. What is this? Oh, it's Russian. I'm like, oh, weird. I thought that the Russian language was removed. Why are all of these signs in Russian? Why do I actually have to install Russian language on my phone to walk around Kharkiv in East Ukraine? It is like night and day. Every argument has already been rehashed. There is nothing new that you can say. It is just redoing the same thing over and over and over again, and then hoping that like we don't know what we're talking about, or like you have a new point this time. Hey, have we told you to make peace? Hey, in my heart, I just think peace is good. You know what? Peace is good, but it would be better if there was security guarantees that Ukraine didn't have to look over their shoulder and worry about Russia continuing constant invasions because we don't actually have solid security guarantees. That is why Ukraine joining NATO is the actual security guarantee because of what NATO can provide. Also, Anna brought up the training that Ukraine provides. It is called Joint Analysis Training Education Center. It is called JTAC. It is in NATO, and we directly get information about drone warfare and what the Russians are doing on the front lines. Everything that they're doing, Ukraine is giving that back to NATO
This
countries.
is a
So we are directly
filibuster,
learning.
isn't it?
I'm filibustering? I'm sorry. I'm
You've
late
been
to the
talking for a
debate.
while, dude.
Yeah, he hasn't been here. He can talk.
I'm
I know,
yeah,
but
I'm
it's
just
like
talking.
you can't account for every minute he
that's
wasn't
okay.
here.
I get it.
Just
You don't
one
have a
long
point.
soliloquy.
You don't have anything to say. You're just going to say war is bad.
No,
making
I
my
would like
point.
to respond. You're just continuing to talk.
Okay, respond. Let's get it. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's various
Thanks,
things
Mike.
that you said in there. You know, one of them is like that I have to harp on again is like, yeah, I'm against war and killing. I don't know why that's such a bad thing. But this whole thing about Russia being prone to invasions and all that kind of stuff, I mean, like, isn't that equally true for the United States? I know that that's a rehashed argument also, but it doesn't seem that anybody can really disprove that fucking point. There's no country in the world which is more prone to invading and killing than the U.S. So, you know, I mean, this whole assumption that we have to fight Russia at every turn and blah, 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 because they're never going to stop invading. Well, if you go by that logic, historical precedent, we're never going to stop invading. So why shouldn't the Russians be paranoid about any of our involvement in Ukraine? And in addition to that, you know, nobody addressed any of Lactoid's fucking points. This whole notion that Russia is gonna attack Europe and invade. Get the fuck out of here! What an insane fucking thing to believe. Do you really think Russia has any intention of going to war with NATO?
2021. You really
Why
think
would you
they're
guys
gonna
want
invade their
Ukraine and
brother
NATO?
country? You're
You
gonna
want
invade
you
Ukraine?
want
That's
Ukraine and
crazy.
NATO
They
to
never
avoid a
invade Ukraine.
conflict
Invade
between Russia and
Chechnya,
Ukraine
invade
because Russia's
Georgia,
not fighting
invade
war with
Moldova.
NATO.
There's no
It's
way
fucking
they'd invade.
insane. It's
You've
insane.
said
You guys are
nothing.
fucking out of your minds.
Yeah, except feelings.
A
Nothing.
3-year fucking war where nothing's been achieved.
Okay, a little
Because
order in the court.
cheerleaders like
Little order in
you.
the court.
Feelings,
Little order in the
feelings.
court. Little order in the court. Little order in the
Over a
court.
million
I don't
fucking
want to mute
people
people,
dead.
but I will.
Feelings.
Okay, I do.
Not yours.
do.
Mine. Shut up.
What, me?
Not you,
Not
Wick.
you.
Oh,
Sorry, Wick.
okay. I'm like, wait, I'm the moderator. I'm
No,
supposed
Wick,
to be
shut up.
talking. What are we doing? Okay.
Stop virtue signaling about my
fuck,
people
Wick?
dying.
I do wanna ask a question though, because this is something that I've seen reports on very recently, where Trump has hemmed and hawed over whether he would honor a call for Article 5. So there is a very real question at play of would NATO membership even protect Ukraine at this point, especially if NATO, or I'm sorry, America and Trump simply does not honor their deal.
Dude.
Other than NATO. So the question here is, other than NATO.
Can I please respond to that? Or
in a
Lactoid?
moment,
One of us?
In a moment. We're gonna go in order here. let me ask my question. Other than NATO, what are some security guarantees, realistic security guarantees, that could be given to Ukraine other than NATO that would protect them? Anna, you want to start? I'll let you start, and then
Yes,
we'll go
I'll
to
start real
around
fast.
here.
Most people in Europe right now are considering the question. Finally, okay, we have been telling them for decades, but now they are considering it. That even if Russia, for example, attacks Baltics or Poland, then will United States or any other countries actually activate Article 5? Because you have to actually vote for that shit. You have to like actually say yes, we are going there. It's not just like it's an immediate thing. So, especially Baltics and Poland and every other Finland, people who have been previously occupied by Russia or like Soviet Union or whatever, right? They are very, very concerned about that, and that seems to be ramping up their desire to invest in their own military and not depend so much on the United States, which for me, I think it's a good thing, honestly, to not depend on the United States as much, because at the end of the day, I mean, they can fuck us over any day of the week, and we should protect ourselves first and foremost. And they also should invest in us, but that's a whole other situation. And when it comes to this and to what agreements would be good, NATO is shaky right now because most people actually in Europe are considering, well, will there be NATO without the United States? If the United States, for example, drops off the face of the earth with Trump, right? So any other security guarantees, for example, maybe an alliance between countries who actually know what Russia is and what it does. For example, Finland, Baltics, Poland, Czechoslovakia. Oh, sorry, Czechia, Slovakia. I don't care about that much. Fico can go fuck himself. But anyhow, point is that we really need to consider that sort of alliance that doesn't maybe even involve Western countries. But the problem with that, of course, is that we don't have nuclear weapons because we have been stripped of them by our lovely allies over here. So point is that France has nuclear weapons and UK has them. UK is not part of Europe anymore because they fucked up major. And now we have only France that is a nuclear power besides the US, which we no longer should count as an ally altogether. So in that sense, of course, any guarantees are good, but they have to be actually signed and actually mentioned, not assurances that we trust me, bro, we will come for you if you're attacked. No, we need, if you're invaded, we will deploy troops. If you are invaded, we will produce, all the things you need, the arms, the things. We will really come through. We need those guarantees. We need guarantees that if our sovereignty is breached again, then it will be considered by people like fully actually helping us out, because we can sacrifice parts of our land, but
Okay.
only if there's something for it in us. That's
I
it,
want to,
pretty much.
yeah, I want to give the mic to I know
Mhm.
Lactoid wanted in, and I know Non-Smoker wanted in. I want to give it to Dylan because he's chomping at the bit too, right? And I see you all, right? I love the energy. I love the energy, but we do have to go and kind
That's
of
pretty
rank it
much
order
it. Yeah.
here. Yeah, yeah. Lactoid.
Sure. In terms of like what sort of security, this is like going to be the hardest question because Russia's already said that NATO is a red line. Like they're not going to accept NATO membership, and they're not going to accept anything that's going to be on par with NATO membership. They're not going to accept anything that would lead to the kind of response that people are looking for if there's some kind of war again in the future. And and that's difficult, right? Because again, Ukraine's in the back foot. The Russians are advancing. And there's I think, real question of, well, eventually, if they keep going and let's say the gains start to shift to be more exponential, like we saw in Vietnam, Afghanistan, or Syria, or something along those lines, perhaps they could even get more in terms of some kind of arrangements or agreements with Ukraine. The other question is, when we're looking at this from like in terms of what Russia wants, I think it makes perfect sense why they would insist that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. I mean, we can imagine some kind of comparable situation for the U.S., right? Let's say that in Canada there was
Wait,
an
that's it.
illegal coup in which the duly elected president was overthrown and replaced with a pro-Russian candidate, and the pro-Russian candidate made
Oh,
moves to bring in Russia as a military ally. You know how quickly the U.S. is going to launch an invasion? I mean, we were willing to end the world in nuclear Armageddon in the Cuban Missile Crisis, despite the fact that we invaded Cuba the year before in the Bay of Pigs. So it is absolutely within like a great power, regional power's interest to maintain a sort of sphere or a power balance in the area. And this is one of the reasons I think why Russia will not accept NATO membership of Ukraine. And another thing they won't accept is they're not going to accept when it comes to Crimea, which is again what Zelensky's been talking about in the past, which is just insane. They're not going to accept a bunch of people in Crimea who don't want to be part of Ukraine all of a sudden having to go and join Ukraine.
How do you know?
They're just not going to accept it.
How do you know? How do you know they don't want to be part of Crimea? Tell me right now.
Every poll that we have.
Don't let him pivot away. He never answered the question.
No.
What question?
He never answered. The question was, what security guarantees can we give Ukraine? He's like, well, we can't do this, we can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think.
We can't do this.
I just
you didn't give an answer. Your
answer
answer
is
question. No security guarantee.
I don't think that there is.
But
I don't think
you said when you opened this shit that Trump was serious. That this was serious negotiation.
I answered the question.
That they're being serious and they're negotiating. And then he comes out here, says 24-hour peace deal was never serious. You come forward. We're waiting for a serious proposal, and you have none.
No. There is a serious proposal for peace. What I'm saying is that if you want
security guarantees,
no. You're not going to be able
then
to
it
have...
isn't.
No, I disagree with you.
Without security guarantees, there is no peace.
I disagree.
There will never be peace without security guarantees. Whoever tells you that is a fucking liar who doesn't care about Ukraine. They just want to hold a piece of paper, be Never Chamberlain, say, hey, look at me, I'm such a peacemaker. Lactoid, fuck you, you don't care.
Exactly.
Lactoid quickly, and then I'll let them respond. So Lactoid, you got to finish up.
So we're just keeping in mind, even ceasefire,
I can at least say something.
Answer the question. What security guarantee? That was Wick's question.
I don't think that you're going to be able to negotiate the kind of security guarantees that you're looking for, like an actual serious deterrent in Ukraine.
Okay, then you don't have peace.
In the exact same way.
Then there's no peace.
In the exact same way that you would never get the U.S. to accept some kind of serious security guarantees for Canada or for Mexico. It simply isn't going to happen. Well, you have plenty of examples where throughout history where, yes, you have ceasefires broken, you have wars come up again.
Berlin.
But just like you said, apparently if NATO is under threat, then these security guarantees also aren't perfect. There's no way that you can ever, for sure, prevent invasion again.
You don't even want to try. You don't even want to try.
We can try. When the Russians have set a red line here, what do you want to do? Just let them keep winning?
Say fuck you and try to push for a better
deal. Say fuck you. You're right. Say fuck you, and then a million dead later, eventually the Russians are going to win.
You wait till you have terms that will stop war. You don't subjugate yourself.
Okay.
Freedom so easily.
Give it to Dylan.
So what, American?
Dylan, it's your turn, right? Dylan, now is your turn. You can respond. I see you.
So weird.
Look, not smoker. I see you too. We'll get you in too. I promise.
Un-American sentiments on a panel full of so many Americans. Okay, look. It's one thing to be like, if we can negotiate with the Russians to avoid a war and avoid all these deaths at the start and not have all that, that'd be great. But to be clear, if there was no NATO, if there was no United States, if there was none of these alliances, Russia would still invade Ukraine. I firmly believe this. The Russians have described ideologically, they believe Ukraine's part of their empire. They think it's an extension of the Ruski Mir. That's the essays Putin has written. These are the speeches he has given. And you can cite whoever the fuck you want about NATO expansion this, NATO expansion that. At the end of the day, if NATO wasn't there, it would just make this job easier. If anything, if there was no NATO, if there was no America, if it was just Ukraine isolated by itself, no Finland to back them up, no Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, no Eastern Europeans, divide and conquer, they would be more excited to invade. They would feel no compulsion to ever come to the table whatsoever, because they would just be like the Tuvans, or would just be like the Chechens. It would just be another sad chapter in history where there's an end to the book of the Ukrainian story. And so when we talk about a million deaths later, the question is, do you surrender, let them kill people anyway, line up the people who believed in Ukrainian civil society, who believed in Ukrainian democracy, who were fighting against anti-corruption efforts, who didn't want a Yanukovych-type figure to come back and try to re-embed the type of corruption that they've desperately been trying to pull out, and they're still trying to pull out from their own government, they were never going to accept that. And so, when you say, a million deaths later, it comes off as so hollow. You don't really care, because how do you avoid it? Because if we get to the hard questions, and this is the problem with Trump, and this is the problem when you say, Trump had a serious proposal to end a war. No, he didn't. He said 24 hours, 24 hours, 24 hours. That's all he said. Just like healthcare, concept of a plan. He seems
serious to end the war. I agree. The 24 hours.
No, he's not serious.
I agree.
He was not serious.
I agree. The 24 hours thing is obviously ridiculous. It was ridiculous hyperbole. But when it comes to
what serious proposal has he put forward to end the war?
Two things. When I met,
just say you don't care, please. Just say you don't give a fuck, and that's it. You don't care.
I do. Look, I wanted a ceasefire. I wanted a ceasefire in Gaza despite the fact that, yes, that ceasefire has been broken a few times, and there was no permanent security guarantees that resulted. But I think it's a good thing when like the bombs stop dropping and we just like come together to try to work out some kind of solution. And
Great.
this expectation, hold on a second, this expectation that the security guarantees that apparently, because Russia poses a threat to NATO are questionable already, these security guarantees that are being insisted on are what the winning Russians right now have said they will not accept. So you have a couple paths ahead of you, right? You can either say, okay, we are not going to accept. We're just going to completely ignore this red line, and we're going to say, fuck it, we're not having peace. And then before you know it, like, yes, the Russians will continue. You're going to continue to have death and destruction, or you can analyze what is Russia's goals here. Why did this war happen? All of this happened because that Yanukovych that you were talking about was unconstitutionally removed. That was a coup that happened in Ukraine.
Should have happened. I'd do it again. I wish I was the one grabbing.
I know, because you guys only hate insurrection if it's
I was the one that dragged on.
You guys don't care about constitution.
Honestly, my problem is the CIA wasn't involved.
All of you.
That's my problem.
You too, Lactoid. Stop, everyone. Okay,
I'm silent.
We gotta let him respond to you, Lactoid. We're gonna give it to Mercado, and let him have a chance. And then non-smoker is after Mercado. Mercado, respond.
I will.
Anna too. Everyone.
I got you. So this is Russia's feelings, what Russia wants, and then if you would have let Lactoid continue, we would have got some more Russian narratives, and like we would have heard the real feelings. Because he was starting, like he was like, "Oh, it was a coup," and he's like, it was starting to come out there. So I actually kind of wanted. Okay.
It wasn't.
So it wasn't.
The American Revolution was a coup, I guess. None of this matters.
Exactly.
You didn't.
I mean, it's just more of like Russia's feelings, what Russia wants for this, without actually holding them accountable or giving Ukraine real security guarantees to prevent Russia from attacking them. Anyways, I'm going to send the rest of my time to Anna.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Anna.
thank
Before
you.
Lactoid.
I didn't expect that. But point is though that we really this is just about the security guarantees. Is the reason why we care for them is because we are willing to sacrifice ourselves right now, but we are not willing to sacrifice people 10 years from now on. This is Eastern Europe has been backstabbed by the West bajillion times, left to Nazis, to communists, to whatever the fuck, right? We have been, we do not trust any security guarantees, and occupation is not peace. It's not the end of dying. It's the end of our nation. I prefer, as a Ukrainian, to be stricken with a drone right now than to live in Russia, which probably I won't be live any long time there because I'm on a list for people to be killed off. So that's not your decision. Your decision as an American people is to either support us or not. That's your decision to make, obviously, right? You voted for that. That's your decision. But it's not your decision to decide what we are supposed to do about our nation surviving or not. We do not accept surrender, because surrender means occupation. And Russian occupation is torture, imprisonment, deportation, death, and rape. That's what it is. And we do not accept that. That's one thing. Second thing, the revolution is such a beaten up point. I don't want to talk really about it. Millions of people participated in it. We hated that motherfucker because he didn't want to bring us towards the European Union, and he also didn't respect any right to protest. He made the dictatorship laws that prohibited, by the way, which your president right now is trying to do, the dictator laws to prohibit gatherings, to prohibit protests, to prohibit any sort of attempts of people to show their will. We were over it. We were over the oligarchs. Did you
follow the Constitution to remove him?
Say it again. I missed it.
Did you guys follow the Constitution when it came to removing him?
He fled. He fled.
Fled to where?
To Russia.
Russia.
Then into Russia.
Kharkiv and then Donetsk, and he was still in Donetsk at the time of the vote, right?
And?
Is that how it works now? A president leaves the capital city and then he's just gone?
Revolution,
like
man!
if Trump goes on a visit
Not
to
in
China,
the
I
the
can run up and grab the
country.
big
He was fleeing the country.
By the way,
he
this is
fled
an
the
important
country.
point.
Okay.
Because this led.
No, he ran
this
away,
led-
dude. It's totally fine.
Yeah, by the way, just to be clear, the Ukrainian constitution doesn't
What's that
specify. Oh
revolution,
yes,
brother?
by the way, you can
Wait,
ignore
problem
the
is
impeachment
Yanukovych
process.
isn't in a jail
as
cell.
long as
You
they
can
run
ignore-
away, it's
wait,
legal.
They didn't put him in a jail cell.
You can
That's the
ignore
problem, honestly.
you can ignore the impeachment process. You can ignore
got
the
away.
Constitution. You can disenfranchise millions
I mean,
of
he wasn't
Crimeans.
there.
Hold on.
He
You can
wasn't there to
disenfranchise millions of Crimeans and people in the Donbass who voted for him in a
Oh, stop
democratic
fucking
election in
virtue
2010.
signaling.
Full of
and that
Donbass.
voted for him. This is
But
not
they
virtue
did.
signaling.
They did vote
This
for
is-
him.
yeah, they voted
How
for him.
Lactoid was such a yapper.
The 2010.
I mean,
Oh,
you
yapping.
voted for him as
Your
well,
ally comes in
Kharkiv.
here
What
and
do you
yaps
mean?
for how
We
long, and I can't
changed.
fucking respond to a point. I'm getting cut off.
My
every 2 seconds.
allies.
So-
We're in the trenches
changed.
here.
Yeah. So just to be clear here,
Things change.
if I can be clear here for a second, okay? So
Usually
you
aren't.
cannot.
Yanukovych won the election in 2010. That election was monitored
He did.
by
Yeah.
multiple international observers. He was the
He did. He
elected
did.
president.
What's your point?
Yes, here's
And?
the point. Here's the point. You guys ignored your constitution, disenfranchised millions of people in
Well,
Crimea and
Is
in the
there,
Donbass.
is there a time
when you
between the
illegally-
election to now?
Hold
Dude,
on.
you can't
Hold
let the
on.
fucking guy
Hold
talk.
on.
Holy
They
shit.
can't do
I
it.
can't stop
Hold on.
laughing.
They can't. They're just gonna
I'll
like
mute
myself.
myself.
They
Once
can't
he
actually.
finishes, hold on. Once Lactoid finishes, I will let you all
Retardation.
respond, but you do have to let him
Thank
finish.
you.
Lactoid,
I am good.
finish.
I'm listening to this retardation.
Great,
This is
great.
straight
No, I
face.
know
I'm good.
they just say, "Oh, that's Russian propaganda," instead of actually. By the way, all this comes
Because
from
it
Western.
is.
All
It's
this comes
dumb,
from
silly
Western.
nonsense.
Yeah, but you
man.
won't even let him
Wick
make
just
a
chimed-
fucking
Then
point.
let him
It's
fucking
so fucking
Let him
dumb.
finish
so
as
he
I
can
interrupt
mute
him.
us individually because I won't be able to stop laughing.
Okay. So
Let him.
all of this stuff comes from Western sources. This idea of, well, it's just Russian propaganda. Notice every time they say that, it's because they don't want to actually engage in the veracity of the point. It's a non sequitur. It's entirely irrelevant to the point. In this situation, it was an illegal coup that disenfranchised millions of people in Crimea, in the Donbass. The 2014 coup, you can look it up. This
I'm
was
from the East,
100% what was
Like,
the
do you know who you're
underlying
talking
cause.
to?
Was 100% the underlying cause
Oh.
of what led to with what led to Crimea, with what led to the war in the Donbass, with what led
No, it's
to the
not.
Ukrainian counter-terrorist operation in the Donbass, in which they fired unguided rockets at civilian population centers in the Donbass.
Never
This happened
did that.
from
Good luck with
2014,
that.
15,
Never
16, 17,
happened. Never
18,
happened. We
19,
never
20,
fired.
21,
Shut up.
according to
Said your thing.
Amnesty, according to
Shut up.
Amnesty, you guys did. And then,
Yeah,
and then
you-
in 2021,
Shut
like all the,
up.
shut up.
You said your thing.
I did not
Yeah,
say my
shut
thing.
up,
I did
please.
not say my thing yet. I'm almost there.
All of it was bullshit. I was
Almost there.
I'm almost there. I'm almost there, right? I'm
Almost
almost
You
there.
can't let the fucking guy
Let him
finish.
play.
This is
I know. Look,
crazy. You're so insecure about your fucking
3
argument.
versus 2. It's 3 versus 2. They had more talking time, definitely with
Go
Mercado
on,
now,
go on.
and I can't even fucking finish. So yes,
Honestly,
and then-
I'm not
and
even
then-
that radical on Maidan, and you're making Lactoid believable to me because you guys won't shut
Okay,
the fuck up and let
hold
him finish his
But
point.
if you're
You
also
shut the
interrupting
fuck up.
Lactoid, I want to be clear. All of
Yeah,
you are
yeah,
interrupting
yeah.
Lactoid. Just land your plane, Lactoid.
Well, to be
We-
fair,
we-
Anna's telling me to shut up in the middle of my point. So
Yes,
yeah,
I am, yeah.
And so this is the context here. This wasn't like this invasion fell out of the sky. It's not like Russia's going to invade NATO because of this. It's not like, well, if they're just going to invade us again, et cetera, et cetera. It's just going to happen. There's no possible way to avoid this. No, there are like specific
Oh my
historical
God, are you
events
done?
that have happened since 2014 that explain Russia's actions. and if we want
telling
peace,
me
bullshit
if we
about my
want peace, if we
country.
want peace, then we should be acknowledging those realities. Thank you. Jesus
It's-
Christ.
Okay,
Okay.
you're highly acknowledged. Let me
Now
answer.
you can respond.
Nothing he said. Nothing he said happened. We never killed any population
Follow
in
me up with
Donbass
sources.
before
I'll
Russia.
send you all the sources you want. Follow.
Okay,
follow
well, now
me.
you gotta let
Get
Anna.
back with
Give
your
her
sources.
Anna's
Interrupting her.
sources.
Yes.
No, to the
Yeah.
audience. To the audience. If
Okay,
you want
so
sources
now
for any
Anna's
of this,
gotta
just follow up.
respond.
to me,
Hold
okay?
on, I don't understand, but Anna's got to respond.
Got it.
Go ahead,
Shh,
Anna.
not you, Vic. Yeah. I
You're
love
doing
you.
great, Wick.
Anyhow, point is
You're doing
that 3,000 civilians were killed in Donbass. Only happened after Russian invasion of Donbass and annexation of Crimea. In Crimea, maybe they wanted to be part of Russia. Perhaps we never know because the referendum was made under the guns of Russians after the annexation and not recognized by any reputable organization, by any country except fucking Russia. Okay, so that's not the way for us to know. By the way, in 1991, the Crimea voted to be independent, to be part of Ukraine. So and so did Donbass and all the other parts of Ukraine. So that's one thing. Second thing, yes, people voted for Yanukovych. In my part of the country as well, like Eastern Europe, Kharkiv, for example, they did vote for Yanukovych. That's not disputed. Nobody disputes that. Yanukovych wasn't, however, at the time of elections, saying that he will turn us away from European Union. That was never brought up. Second thing, we were like on the course to remove the trade deal with Russia and to join towards the European Union. That's one thing. Second thing, he wasn't making dictator laws when he was elected. And yes, he was a Russia-friendly candidate, and a lot of Eastern Ukrainians voted for him because simply of the trade relations. So a lot of us worked in Russia. We had like some sort of connections with Russia, trade with Russia, all sorts of things. So a lot of people really wanted to maintain that relationship, whereas the Western Ukraine had a lot of trade and economic relations with Poland, for example. That's something you don't know because you don't know shit. So it doesn't matter really. So at the end of the day, that's what happened. And Yanukovych betrayed us. He changed course, and we were on our way to basically become Belarus, and the elections would be cancelled altogether. You are lucky in your country to not suffer for that sort of shit. Unfortunately for us, we live in Eastern Europe. So we know where oligarchs come to power and try to, become dictators. We can clock that. We have lived under dictators for a long time. So yeah, we had a revolution that millions of people participated in. It was a conflict. You're not wrong. Like there was like a huge divide between the people. Some people supported it, some people did it. That's true. It's not a disputed. Everyone agrees with that. There was like 40-60 dispute, like 55 maybe even dispute between people. It was pretty divisive time, and most people who participated in it, including myself, obviously wanted to be part of the western part. And I am from the east. I'm from Kharkiv. I spoke Russian my whole life. My mom is Russian, so whatever, right? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So it really wasn't a coup. It was a revolution where our president used violent force against us, using Berkut special forces, right, to beat the fuck out of the protesters, to kill them, and also to prohibit any sort of protests. So we didn't like that. And it turned out to be 3 months strong revolution. And that's pretty much it. And you can shut the fuck up because you are just a bot.
Right,
You're a Russian bot.
Hold on.
Wait,
We do have to let me respond. It's Smoker. Smoker has to go.
Wait, there's a lot of shit that was just said.
I understand.
One sentence.
And I'm going to give you the rule of
I didn't address half of it.
I didn't cut you off in the middle and start telling you to shut up, okay? I actually let you finish.
True,
yeah, I
that's
did.
true.
Notice how you did the thing that happens where it's like, oh, you're just a Russian bot, you're just etc. When all this shit is easily accessible on Wikipedia, on Western sources, you can find all this shit.
Yeah, it says Euromaidan,
Wait. Apparently, I don't know shit. But for those of you in the audience, you should look up Ukrainian Constitution Article 108 specifies specifically how the president can be removed. The Euromaidan insurrectionists did not follow that process whatsoever.
Here's a question. Here's a basic question, Lagros. I'm sorry. I can't.
Hold on.
This fucking, it's so stupid. We're wasting time.
This is crazy.
Hold on. I know. They can't. Like, I just let her ramble.
Let the fucking guy just talk, guys.
Why are you reinforcing the lie? And you know it's a lie. Zero values.
It's not a lie.
As soon as he's done, Dylan, you can tear him into him.
By the way, when you go, Dylan, I want you to specify exactly what I said was a lie, okay? And audience, watch, see if you can do it. So when it comes to the Euromaidan insurrection, right? First of all, the last poll that we have prior to Yanukovych being removed was in January of 2014. 45% of Ukrainians were in favor of Euromaidan. 48% were opposed. The overall movement did not have majority support in all of Ukraine. It had majority support in Kiev and the west of Ukraine. And by the way, Article 108 and Article 111 specifies what you need to do to have an impeachment, and they didn't follow that process whatsoever.
Yeah, we didn't. What's your problem?
And last point, the Berkut or whatever that we're talking about. Keep in mind, 13 Berkut were killed from the insurrectionists. Buildings were occupied before any shooting. Yep. Buildings were occupied by people with with petrol bombs and sticks and rifles. Petrol bombs and sticks and rifles.
I think he's talking about Odessa, maybe.
And if we want to say, well, if the police shoot people attacking government buildings, then all of a sudden that invalidates the government. Well, what about Ashley Babbitt? Then I guess Biden's wasn't
they should have shot the students. They should have shot the students.
That's not how constitutions work. How constitutions work, if you actually care about constitutions, if you actually care about the rule of law, you have to follow constitutions. All of this preceded directly.
Didn't you support a guy who said he wanted to terminate the Constitution?
All of this directly preceded Russian involvement when it came to Crimea and
we wanted to remove a dictator. We removed him. What's your point? Nobody argues with you. You're correct.
Okay, well, if you're going to break the law, you're going to break your own constitution. Don't act Pikachu face when Crimea wants to leave.
Dylan, Dylan,
If he
now's
didn't
your
want to
chance.
leave,
They don't want
They
to
did
leave.
want to leave. The UN polls
Maybe
indicate they
it's
wanted to
awesome.
leave.
Okay, gang.
Pew
gang,
Research
gang.
indicated they
Hold
want to
on,
leave.
hold on,
Citing
hold
the
on,
UN
hold
data
on,
too.
hold on,
The most
hold on.
recent UN data before the annexation showed basically a tie.
Yeah.
Have you
But-
seen the one directly after the annexation? 88%.
Oh, after the
But
annexation,
from
when
Pew
the Russians-
Research,
didn't
from
you-
Pew
I'm
Research, a
sorry,
Western
okay.
source.
Okay, you know what? Tell me when I can talk because I thought it was, interrupting.
Dylan, it is.
somebody or
Oh,
something, right?
oh, are you
It's just-
kidding me?
Bullshit.
You've been cutting me off every fucking time. Don't act victim. Shut the fuck up. Jesus Christ.
Dylan.
Okay,
You shut the
so
fuck up.
lactoid
you.
is very un-American. That's what I would
Okay.
say lactoid is. Because if your first thought is, hey, if Biden hired MS-13 gang members to go beat up protesters and try to provoke shit, and then say, you know what, protesting's not allowed. You can't grow up and get in groups of 3 people. I don't care if I pulled out of this agreement in the middle of the night. I don't care if my security services wrapped screws and nails on flashbangs or threw it in the crowd. It doesn't matter if some people died. It doesn't matter if some kids were beaten. It doesn't matter if all that was publicized. Anything could be done because there was an election. So it doesn't matter if he does something illegal. It doesn't matter if Yanukovych does something unconstitutional. It doesn't matter if he murders his own people. It doesn't matter if he tries to get rid of civil society as a concept by trying to ban protesting. If Biden banned protesting in the United States after hiring MS-13 gang members to beat up protesters, Russia, you guys wouldn't be saying we need to get rid of Biden. Biden needs to be impeached. Biden needs to be removed, or we need to, if that's not possible,
Zelensky banned
physically remove them.
anti-Ukrainian media.
Let me wait. Listen to this. Listen to this. There's no response. It's not the murdering of Ukrainians by the government doesn't matter to him. The Yanukovych banning protest doesn't matter to him. He does not believe in American principles when it comes to Ukraine. He's fine with them being controlled by an authoritarian government. Freedom's for me, but freedom's not for thee. So he's going to come here, and his main thing is, well, the Russians seem pretty provoked, and it wasn't exactly it wasn't constitutional how they removed the guy that was murdering them and banning protesting. Listen to yourself. There's law and order, and there's subservience to power, and that's what you're asking the Ukrainians to have done.
Zelensky
I wanna
banned
give it
media.
to non-smoker.
Zelensky banned media that's opposed to him. There's a reason why Coach
Which one?
Red Pill
What
is
do you mean
dead.
banned
There's
media?
a reason
That's
why
what
Coach
Zelensky-
Red Pill is
I
dead right
think
now.
Zelensky.
There's a reason why Coach Red Pill is dead right
I
now.
think Zelensky.
And last
should
wait,
be put
no,
on
last
throne,
thought here.
swung
Coach
around.
Red Pill
I think
is-
Zelensky should have his balls.
Dylan
I
Burns
can
said
say
that I
can go
lied
to
about
Ukraine in a
something.
week,
He
2
didn't
weeks,
specify.
3 weeks. It doesn't matter.
Notice how
I can say
notice how he
I
never
had
specified
such
what I lied about.
gay-loving sex with
Dylan, what
Zelensky.
did I lie
I
about?
slammed his
Specify.
cheek so
Specify.
hard, I can go there
Dylan,
next week.
specify
the
what I
week
lied
after,
about.
the
Specify
week
what I lied
Let's
about.
mute everyone. Okay?
Thank you.
I don't
Too
like
much
to use the
shouting.
mute button, but I fucking will. Non-smoker has been so patient. So patient. And I know we're all in our feelings. Okay? I get it. It's very strong. There's a lot to talk about. But please, if I tell you to shut up, listen to me. Okay. Go ahead, non-smoker. I will unmute the people now. Go ahead.
Yeah. What were we talking about? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
So
Gay sex
I
with Zelensky.
thought, look, I mean, the Maidan thing, I'm not even as, really invested in that narrative as Lactoid is. I mean, I do think that Maidan kind of demonstrates that the whole narrative of Ukraine as like a budding democracy is somewhat bullshit, but, it's a Ukrainian political matter. I'm not going to say like, oh, this or that aspect or whatever. Look, I mean, yeah, there's millions of dollars of U.S. NGO funding involved there, but it was a legitimate grievance with the elected leader, and he chose to flee. Whatever, it's Ukrainian politics. I don't have a very strong stance on that one way or another. I think we were talking about security guarantees before it devolved into that. And I think, there's what I think will happen, and there's what I feel like would be
And
fair.
to just reiterate my questions, just so you know, right?
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
asking you, other than NATO, what security guarantees would you think would be sufficient to prevent further conflict?
Yeah, I don't. So look, it's not going to be the right answer that you want or my chat wants or anyone here wants. It's going to manage, I think, to piss everyone off. But I actually think, and I've argued this since the start of the conflict, or relatively early on into the conflict, the first year or so, that I felt like a really good compromise would be actually if Ukraine gives up the occupied provinces and then they're allowed to join NATO, and then I would like to see the U.S. leave NATO. That to me would make the most sense. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. In fact, I don't think it'll ever happen. But in my view, that kind of checks off a lot of boxes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. You said U.S. will leave NATO?
The U.S.
and
would
we
leave
join
NATO, yeah. The U.S. would leave NATO.
Why?
Ukraine would join what remains of NATO, and then Russia would annex the occupied provinces.
Why do you think that's good?
Well, I think that kind of ticks off all the boxes. I think it's what the Russians essentially wanted, a buffer zone, or they wanted some sort of control over.
Yeah.
Or they look.
Not
The
gonna
Russians
accept
view
NATO,
Ukraine
Smoker.
as part of their sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, if they get the territory that they view as historically Russian, and it fulfills
Which
this
is all of Ukraine.
of having a sphere of influence, they've already kind of occupied it using military power. The Ukrainians haven't been able to push them out, even with our support. The Russians essentially won it in a war. That's how I see it. Ukraine joining NATO gives them some significant security guarantee. It's not airtight, but it's pretty fucking good. And then I think the U.S. pulling out is just because I don't think the U.S. should be involved in European military theaters of any kind.
That's kind of unexpected.
That's insane.
But it's not the worst thing I ever heard. Surprised.
It's an answer, though. It's more than what Lactoid gave.
Well,
True.
no, it's an infeasible answer.
Gotta give him credit there.
It's an infeasible answer. They're not going to accept.
Practical. It's not practical. This is just abstraction.
Well, if we're talking about abstraction,
The reason it's not practical is because there's no solution outside of reinforcing Ukraine.
First of all, Dylan, what did I lie about? Notice how you never said it. But non-smoker. If we're just going to talk about
through the lies and go back into that.
If we're going to leave the realm of practicality, okay, then sure, like all fairies and dust, magic dust, great, perfect. But the reality on the ground is, first of all, I don't support U.S. leaving NATO. But even if we did, the Russians aren't going to accept Ukraine joining NATO. They're just not. Like this is what really triggered the 2022 invasion. Like one of the main reasons.
No, it's not.
It was NATO.
Off.
They gave a specific demand several days prior to the invasion, guarantee that Ukraine will never join, and we rebuffed that.
Finland joined.
Wrong.
They have
Why did Finland and
Baltic.
Sweden
They
join?
have
Both of them
borders.
did.
I don't think they expected that. This was
problem?
in the middle of the invasion.
They didn't. Then why didn't they invade Finland? Or like, why didn't
Because
they?
they're busy. They got their hands
Anna,
full.
busy.
Okay, the Baltic. Busy. Are you serious? Oh my
That's
God.
with Ukraine. They're losing all these tanks, guys. They're losing all these tanks. They're losing all these men. Right? They're busy.
Just embarrassing.
We got to give it to Andrew. Andrew has some
That's so
thoughts on this.
American. So embarrassing. Oh.
It is embarrassing. I'm sorry. It's like it's the same. Like you can tune
No
into this
argument.
and watch Solova. I'm making the argument. I'm actually talking. So you can actually tune into this on like Russia Today and just get it right from the source. You don't have to listen to this like third tier person down the line like regurgitating it. Like you just listen to the Russians. I'm telling you right now. Listen to the Russians. Listen to it on Translate. Put the subtitles on, and you'll hear them say exactly what Lactoid's saying. I give the rest of my time to Anna. Go ahead, Anna.
What if I just said that you guys were spouting Ukrainian propaganda and then refused to engage with any of your points?
No.
Like how
We
lazy
didn't
would that
refuse.
be?
We did
How
engage. You just
lazy
didn't
would that
respond
be?
to our engagement.
No,
It's
Mercado
really
didn't respond at all. And
society
I engaged you
propaganda.
specifically on everything, Dylan, and you said
Okay,
that I lied about
let me
something, and you had to specify. What did I lie about?
Well, for example, you lied about tank replenishment.
sorry.
That was one example of a lie you
What did I
made.
say about tank replenishment?
That
was a conversation you had with non-smokers.
You said the tanks are being produced. Wait, you were
That
talking
was with
about
non-smoker. Go back and watch.
Dogs, wait, it was completely you?
was
Where
There's
are
so many
you right
lies,
now?
I'm getting lost in the lies. I'm getting lost in the lies. That's what's happening. There's so much I get lost
Okay,
in.
hold on. Before anyone else goes, just so we're clear, okay? Just so we're clear, because I am curious. So, Dylan, and this is to you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Lactoid did have a lot to say on a lot of things, and he asked you in that spiel that he did, where
Honestly,
was he incorrect?
I completely forgot what we were even talking about. We've moved on. What were we talking? Can you remind me? Remind me. Maybe I'll remember.
Done.
Oh my God.
We were talking about Zelensky getting his cheeks clapped. Don't talk to me like, oh my God, how did you forget? All of you are yelling.
Euromaidan, I think, was the big thing.
Yeah.
Euromaidan.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what did he say about Euromaidan?
His argument, and I'll steal minutes so he doesn't. So
I honestly can't remember.
You're
It's all.
misrepresenting.
Does this matter, or are we moving on?
Let me remind you then, okay? Because I am curious what your response is here, right? Is that
Okay.
Lactoid's argument is that Yanovich, I'm going to mispronounce his name.
Yanukovych.
Right?
Yanukovych.
We're off to a great start, Wick.
Give me a moment, okay? My pronunciation sucks. Okay.
It's all right, Wick.
It was an illegally removal of a world leader, the Ukrainian leader, that disenfranchised the voters who voted for him. And his argument, Lactoid's argument, is that provided justification to the Russians to come in.
It
Where
didn't.
is he wrong?
Justification. Well, just to clarify, when I say justification, I'm talking about justification for specific things, but explanation for other things. Not
Okay, I'm
necessarily
keeping it
justification for
short and
everything.
simple so I can give it
I
to
don't know
Dylan
what
so
that
Dylan can
means.
respond. Dylan, make your
Okay.
response, please.
So it was. Sorry, you fucking confused me at the end. Say the first half again. I'm sorry. If I
No,
get
no, 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 here.
Yeah.
Question,
Keep it in.
point blank.
Point blank.
Did they follow the Constitution when they removed Viktor Yanukovych from power on February 22nd of 2014?
I honestly don't think it matters, and I think you pretending it matters is making you lie by omission. But this is the problem, okay?
Not following the
If somebody,
Constitution doesn't matter?
no, sorry, I'm sorry.
Let him
I'm sorry.
answer.
I'm sorry.
Dylan,
By the way,
answer.
you voted for
Dylan.
Trump, so I don't even think you think it matters, okay? So the first thing is, if Biden was to go out and murder his own people and was to do everything that Yanukovych did, you would support a revolution against that man in a heartbeat. And if somebody came up and said, well, what's the constitutional way of removing him as he murders us, outlaws protesting, says we can't come out against him, tries to gobble up all the press, as that's going on, and he's making these pushes that the Ukrainians are very familiar with, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to go file a petition? Are they supposed to go tweet on Twitter? Are they supposed to sit on their ass like you? Or are they supposed to stand up for their country, which is what they did? So when you say, oh, this unconstitutional, you're leaving out information that makes it a lie by omission. That's what it makes it, a lie by omission.
Wait. So when I say
Dylan.
they violated the Constitution, which specifies the impeachment process,
To be-
disenfranchising.
Wait, just answer me. What would you do to Biden if Biden did what Yanukovych did?
So this
answer
is
that question.
I will answer it. I want to point out, though, this is not me lying. You're just accusing me of having a double standard. That's not the same
Really?
thing.
No, this is
You're
lying by omission. Okay, if I
falsely-
say,
hold on.
you
if
falsely-
I
hold
exclude
on,
certain
hold on,
information, you
hold on,
are lying.
Hold on, you
If I don't include information, you're lying by
Holy
omission.
shit,
I
dude.
included
If I
all
talk
the, I
about
included all the
Bill,
relevant
don't
information.
include the invasion of
I
Poland, don't
I
include
included
the
all.
information. You are misrepresenting.
Can I answer?
it.
Wait,
Wait,
hold on.
Dylan, if,
Can I answer?
if all
Wait,
the
wait,
stuff-
wait.
Hold on.
I can speak for myself.
Lactoid. I want lactoid.
Why are you getting on me? He cut me off.
Third party. I understand, but give me a second to fucking moderate because this has been a nightmare on moderation on my part. But we'll go. Okay.
You love it.
Lactoid. Okay. So that's the question at hand. Given that, as Dylan pointed out, and as Anna also pointed out, that the leader of the country, whose name I'm going to mispronounce, so I'm not going to pronounce it, who was removed, was engaging in violating the Constitution himself, right? By shutting down protests, by murdering his own people, by...
That's
That's the
allowed?
accusation.
That's allowed,
the accusation.
Lactoid. You can shoot your own people. You can outlaw
Can I
protests.
just
That's fine.
wait. Let me respond without you
Answer the
summarizing.
question.
Can I
Yeah,
please
we're
respond?
talking about
The question,
that.
like,
It's not about
does that not
Maidan. It has been
justify
years.
if the
Let's talk
contract
about
is broken?
now.
Just real quick, Anna. Just real quick. If the contract's been broken by the leader, why should they have to follow the Constitution to remove him?
Okay, let me respond without having these guys interrupt me, please. So
Yeah.
when Dylan Burns accused me of lying, right? His lie of omission was trying to point to some whataboutism as towards my position on Joe Biden. I'm not talking about my position on Joe Biden. We can talk about that later
Did he
if you
not?
want. You can
Let's not.
accuse
Much later,
me.
probably
They're
after
not-
the
hey,
show.
Wait. Can you get these animals under control for a second? So when it comes to the situation here, you whataboutism to a different topic to try to point out some kind of hypocrisy of mine that's irrelevant to the question about whether or not I lied when I said that they violated the Constitution when they removed Yanukovych, which they did. Everything that I said was true. 13 Berkut were killed in those riots, and the shooting of the so-and-so protesters, those were insurrectionists who were armed, occupying government buildings and throwing
Wrong.
petrol bombs, and they were
No.
marching. Hold on,
Wrong.
and they were marching on Parliament.
Well, there's a new lie.
You're
That
lying.
was easy.
Now you're lying.
Just
Now
get
you're
your
lying.
lie
lying.
working.
Thank you
Get
for
them under
lying
control.
for us now.
Quick, get them under control.
Yeah.
please.
Okay, land your plane.
They were marching on public buildings in Parliament when the shooting occurred. Now, do I think it's a good thing when you have like death and violence between the government and between rioters? No, I think it's a bad thing. But that just because you happen to leave the capital city, just because you have police forces that are shooting people who are occupying government buildings and throwing firebombs at people, that doesn't invalidate the Constitution. The Constitution does not prevent Yanukovych from doing the things that he was doing during the Euromaidan insurrection.
Okay.
Nothing I
With
said
that
was a
If
said-
you
lie.
crush civil
With that said,
liberties, the government
go
no
ahead.
longer has a right
Other
to
side,
exist.
respond.
Period. End of paragraph.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
just true. Wait. You
The
responded to
Give it to
my
Andrew. Let
opinion
Andrew
with an
respond. Let
opinion.
Andrew
Berkut
respond to you.
shot
I
the-
didn't
Berkut
lie.
So we can
Berkut
move on.
shot
Oh my-
the students first, and that's what brought more and more people out to be in
Yes.
the revolution and the millions of people that went out there. The
The
Berkut
problem
when
shot
did
with
they
the
shoot him?
security
people.
When
guarantee.
did they
Okay,
shoot
now
him?
we're pivoting away. Lactoid can't talk about security
When
guarantees.
did
He doesn't
they
have an
shoot him?
answer. He doesn't have a solution, and so instead we're pivoting
when did
away
they
to
shoot him?
this.
Yeah,
Wait.
stop
This is from
doing
Mercado.
it.
This is from
Who
Mercado.
cares?
Mercado. When did they shoot him? What month was that?
I'm not going to give you an exact month or date. They shot. There
Ah.
was the first event that happened. Oh,
Sure,
because I don't know the
Was it
exact
before?
date.
Was it before
Yeah,
or
why
after?
would you do that?
Was it before or after the insurrectionists were occupying
It's
public
the same.
buildings?
You're labeling them
Were they-
insurrectionists. They were
yes,
protesting
they
Yanukovych.
literally
They were not
removed the
insurrecting
government.
anything.
They were not in the
Well,
building.
that
when they were getting
happened
shot.
after. Are you shitting me right
I
now? You
was
think the
there,
government was
shut
removed
up.
first?
What were they doing occupying government buildings with firebombs?
What?
They weren't in the building.
This
They were shot in
happened
the
after
streets.
the students were shot. What are
Is
you
this
talking
happening?
about?
No,
You know the
Okay, wait.
timeline?
To all of you in the audience,
You know the timeline.
Go to Wikipedia, look up
Wait,
Euromaidan,
wait.
and look at the timeline.
They
There was
didn't clear out the building
occupations
with
of
machine
government.
guns. They sniped
Wait,
people on the
No.
street.
They were
There was
literally fucking
there was
there,
occupation of
exactly.
government buildings.
Okay.
There was
God.
attacks
No
from
wonder
the
you voted
insurrectionists
Trump. Makes sense.
before the shootings.
Yes.
Please.
And
It makes sense. You're a
they are
Trump voter.
lying about this, and they're
MAGA
just
Trump voter
deflecting
for
with
sure.
Russian
Like a guy who
propaganda.
was half
You
watched
voted
the
for
movie
Trump.
trying to retell you
You
a
voted for
script.
Trump. Do you have a different standard for Biden? No, they're dodging the issue
Fuck
because they
Biden.
know that I'm
It's not
right
about
about
him.
I
this.
do have a
Okay.
You could
question.
stay
Anna,
in the area.
Anna,
You wouldn't. Whatever.
Anna wants to respond. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. I have been. Uh, None of that matters, by the way. We are talking about fucking Maidan for no reason. We are supposed to talk about the recent meeting and security guarantees and all of that. We're not
That's what
talking
they do,
about that.
Anna. Yep.
Yeah, but that's not only that, but also how the fuck, like this guy, like literally, like is just he wasn't there. He knows fuck all. Berkut attacked us first, which is unfortunate. We tried our very best to be peaceful for a long time, and the first clash was in Institutska Street in Kiev, which happened in January, and then there was another major crash that happened in February. Those were two major clashes where most of the protesters have been killed, which, by the way, very nice that he knows the number of Berkut that died, but never brought up the hundred
It
something
says
people
100
that were
plus.
killed.
It says 100 plus.
Yes, 100 plus. It's difficult to
Yep.
say because a lot of them have been cremated illegally by Yanukovych regime. It also is difficult to say because a lot of them are disappeared, so we still don't know what the fuck they are. They have been. There is a footage, of course, of the person with their head cut off being brought to the forest nearby, but other than that, we really don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that there was a peaceful protest against by students mostly, people my age. I was 19 at the time. There was a peaceful protest at the beginning of it that really started it off because they really kind of basically just said like, we want to be part of Europe, we don't want a trade deal with Russia. And Yanukovych's response to that was to beat the fuck out of them, like beat them damn near to death, basically, severe injuries. So the nation saw that on TV, and most people who even didn't give it that much of a fuck about the European Union at the time was like, well, that's not good. We have an actual president who is okay with beating the fuck out of the peaceful legal protest. And not only that, but after that legal protest, he also goes on and accepts this dictatorship laws, which would prohibit the gathering of the people, more than 5 people, if I remember it correctly. It prohibited any sort of protest whatsoever, and also gave insane sentences to people who did protest. So like jail time, all that, right? So that happens, and that brings even more people to the protest, which ended up being millions of participants with the flow. Not every day, but with the flow, right? With the flow of the 3 months. So in terms of that period, the protest back and forth was happening, and there was like agitation on both the side of the protesters and Berkut and all of that. That's true, obviously, because, such a huge movement will cause violence inevitably with a force like Berkut. But we didn't actually throw any Molotov cocktails or anything at them before first person was killed. And first person that was killed was Negayan, Armenian Ukrainian, very young, nice, amazing person who has been unfortunately killed by Berkut. And only after his death that the protest escalated to the point of actual real clash between the two parties. But what do I know? I was there.
No. So
Okay,
for those in the audience, you can look right now. Wikipedia, Euromaidan.
Yeah, go look and
look at the timeline. Look at the timeline. You will
Fair
see
enough. They can research
hold on.
Euromaidan
Hold on. You will. What she said is incorrect. In November, you had rioters that were occupying public buildings. They were clashing with the police. They were armed with sticks and petrol bombs. This was happening well before.
Lactoid's telling you what Anna was doing out there, guys.
Before. I don't know what Anna specifically was doing, but Anna doesn't have eyes
If
on
that's
the
what you're
entire
doing.
country. What I'm talking about is what was happening based on the documents and evidence that you yourself research. You can put in a little bit of effort
there was no
and go look this shit up.
Okay.
This was happening
Go look it
prior.
up.
And also
Just didn't
the
listen to
reason
it.
why
I
this
do-
is important. I'm
I
going
do.
to say why this is important, okay? The reason why this is important is because there's this like narrative going around that you can't trust Russia because they just launch invasions of whatever fucking country they can. But the reality is, in this circumstance,
it's our problem.
there was way more context to this specific conflict.
Fuck your context, who cares?
And this narrative is preventing us from getting peace.
Here's the context that, by the way, I'm sorry, if we're going to be doing this is the last piece of context I need to add. The Budapest Memorandum clearly stated, the last thing, the Budapest Memorandum clearly stated that Russia could not engage in economic coercion against Ukraine after taking its atomic arsenal, and that's exactly what it did to make Yanukovych cave to the association agreement in the middle of the night, pull it in the middle of the night, which caused protests, which they have responded to with metal sticks and flashbangs to beat the shit of those student protesters, which caused the rest of the chaos. So if you're saying, Russia didn't do anything, Russia caused the Euromaidan. Russia's the cause of it. They initiated it through their economic coercion. You just didn't read the prelude, man.
No, I have.
Okay, and I try to retell the script.
Can we get out of Maidan?
We have gone over the Euromaidan thing. I want to get us back. I want to bring us back. I do, right? After I read these super chats, because I got to make a little money here, okay? After I read the super chats, I would ask one more question for you all, and it's going to be about the present day, the current state of affairs.
Thank you.
Get into it. Great, cool. Everyone good? We got it all out of our system? I hope so. Let's make a little money. $5 from Zach. Lactoid, bald guy. When's your "Are we the baddies" moment? Thank you.
That's rude. Bald guy, I mean.
$5.
Maybe it's on purpose. Maybe he shaves.
Well, I'm also bald, so I wasn't sure, right? But Testicle Johnson for $5. Lactoid is very upset. Anna blocked him on Twitter. He told me he was embarrassed.
I did?
Apparently.
I don't know. Did I?
Fine. You did, but it's fine. You don't have to.
He's intimidated by her. He wants to know if she'll unblock him. Thank you for the $5.
I don't know. I don't know if I blocked you. I have no idea. I blocked so many people. I block all people. I don't see how. I've been harassed 24/7. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's all good. We're not here to litigate blocks. $50 from Dwight Baldwin. Thank you for the $50. Question for Dylan. This is for you. Why is most of NATO's GDP spending on military, excluding a few countries like Poland, so low? Europe recently made talk that they're going to 3.0 plus, unclear if they will follow. Please answer without reflecting to Trump.
It's basically like the peace dividend. After World War II, definitely after the end of the Cold War, Europe basically set into the idea that, okay, we have now entered the peace of liberalism. Liberalism, shall always expand through trade and whatever the fuck, and that it'll bring an age of peace and prosperity through economic integration and otherwise, which we're hearing Trump talk about the same logic right now. Or economic integration with Ukraine's the best security guarantee they could get. But it was bullshit. And Europe did not want to deal with the political considerations of having to tell their populations that they're going to have to spend a lot more on defense spending. And now the EU is also willing to take on more fiscal debt, which it was not willing to do before in order to build up its defense capacity. A lot of it was free riding on the United States. I think a lot of it's been overblown to the point where you're just kind of lying about numbers. $350 billion in aid to Kiev. Like, these are made up numbers. Europe has passed this a while ago when it comes to aid to Kiev. But they need to spend more, and they need to build up their production capacity because that's what they lack, especially when it comes to air defense.
Okay.
Yep.
$5 from, £5 from Rizius. Peace is nice, but doesn't the form of...
Wait, one last thing. Somebody just said they checked with the Wikipedia, and they said the first entry, it says November 30th, violent crackdown on protesters. Just wanted to throw that out there.
In November, not January.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
No way.
Wait. In November, not January, right?
November 30th. Yes, before January.
Yes.
Before January.
Okay,
so months before January.
Right, so the clashes were occurring before January.
So that means Yanukovych were beating protesters for months before they did what they did. Yes.
We beat them. Yeah,
that's clashes, the violence is back and forth. You can look it up. I mean, it's very clearly on.
No.
Really, the first day, November 30th, the students had knives.
I'm surprised you're having to get this from your audience, but apparently
tell me what happened on
how many years?
I've been there, and I'm sorry you don't know what happened on November 30th.
Well, apparently you don't know either, because you didn't get it from your chat.
You have paid attention. You have paid attention. I didn't check the Wikipedia because I don't need to go to Wikipedia to research the war. I read the.
You just don't do the research. I agree.
Okay. Thank you for the €5, Rizius. 10 euros. So that was £5. 10 euros from Prussian Menace. Russia can't invade NATO, but they would love to and work to make it possible. These losers would make the same arguments to not defend NATO members as they do now for Ukraine. America has lost its balls. Thank you for the 10
That's
euros.
European opinion, by the way. That's just all of European opinion right now. Yeah. No balls.
$2 from Cameraman 502, and this is to Lactoid. Would you support giving Ukraine nukes?
No, what the fuck?
Okay. $5 from
So you're
Gregor.
taking them, but you don't
But
support
we can
returning
take them
Why not?
though.
That's the same
Yep.
question.
I'll just take them away. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah,
Five-
well, anyhow.
$5 from Greg Yo. Lactoid, is your argument that Russia would only accept a peace plan that would allow them to invade again?
Yep.
Potentially. I think that
Okay.
just like the U.S., I just do not think the U.S. would accept any kind of neighboring country.
Yes.
Like remember, we were willing to go to nuclear Armageddon when it came to
That's your
Cuba.
answer.
When it comes to Cuba getting what means to defend itself. Do I
Okay.
think this means that they're going to invade again? No, not necessarily.
Okay. 10
How did it end with
pounds.
Bay of Pigs, man? We
10
give up.
pounds from Rizius.
Oh.
I appreciate the Lactoid, by the way. I was rude with him, but I didn't expect him to be so clear about this right now. Props to
Appreciate
the
the
guy
honesty.
right now.
It
Yeah.
is.
Props
It
to
is
Yeah,
nice.
you,
yeah.
Lactoid. Okay, 10 pounds from Rizius. Why does it seem like the Russian red line matters so much more than the Ukrainian red line? Isn't the point of Trump being such a good mediator is that he can get a peace deal
Part
honored
of
by
the
both
deal.
sides?
Because the Russians are winning.
No, they're not.
The Russians are winning.
Okay,
I mean,
$5
are you guys
from
arguing the
Cameraman 502?
Russians are losing?
Nobody's winning right now. Yeah, it would be
Nobody's
silly
winning.
to say that.
Even if
Nobody's
like any size.
winning a war
Russia's
isn't
occupying
like okay,
20% of the country.
Winning a war isn't like a spreadsheet. Winning a war is you have an objective and it's political. For example, like Clausewitz, fucking
Yep.
easy peasy bullshit, right? That means, for example, if a goal for the Ukrainians is to survive as a nation state and expel the Russians, they have not succeeded. That they have not won the war, and they are not winning the war in the sense of expelling them, but they're winning in the sense that they are still exist. You go to the Russians, their goal was to subsume Ukraine, take it over. They failed in that, but they had other goals. And some of those goals are partially achieved when it comes to taking over the Donbass. They haven't taken over all of the Donbass, but they've taken some of it. And so it's like neither have won, neither are particularly winning. Like there's territory that's moving, but it's like point is I mean stalemate has been the descriptor for a while, and territorially
How about
it's
this?
still mostly a stalemate.
Also, really quick, they said they were going to take Ukraine in 3 days. Didn't happen. And every strategic objective Russia's wanted to accomplish in Ukraine, they've lost. It's been
Yeah,
catastrophic
well,
for their military
I mean,
strategic
lost
objectives. in
every
Ukraine.
strategic
Yes,
objective.
it's all failed.
They're
All of it's
occupying
failed.
20% of the country.
What are they
And
occupying
nearly,
the
and
initial
nearly
days?
all of Luhansk, by the way. It's almost entirely occupied.
It is.
What? Can you say it again?
Almost.
They're just saying that Ukraine is losing territory, but they're somehow also winning because they're fighting.
Nobody said they're winning. We just said nobody's winning.
Nobody is.
that's
I
what
mean,
you
I guess
said,
in war
Alan.
nobody
Yeah,
wins, but like
it's
the
a
Russians are
different
winning
view
on the
of the conflict
battlefield.
entirely.
Oh, okay.
We're not winning
Very
at the
deep.
battlefield, but okay.
Well,
When's the last time Russia was invaded, by the way? When was that?
Oof.
World War
Oof.
World War II?
Okay.
Oof. Big oof. Anyhow,
For sure.
let's move on.
Wait, what was the point?
$5.
Wait. What was the point of that? Just out of curiosity.
Well, the point is that's not something you can just like. They can't allow Ukraine to occupy Russia, right? Like if the lines froze right now, that would be uncomfortable for the Russians if they're occupying part of Kursk,
I mean,
right?
we have Kursk, but
Exactly.
There's not going to be a peace deal
They're
signed
not
where
gonna
there's a
accept-
People's
yeah, yeah.
Republic of Kursk from the Ukrainian
Exactly.
side. They're
Yeah,
not.
they're gonna
The Russians are
be
never
Because
going to
if you're the
accept.
Russian,
Oh,
if you're the
just
Russians
on the-
in Kursk,
That's
Just
a
real quick,
card
just
that's
real quick.
leverage that the Ukrainians can use.
And just
in
real quick,
negotiations.
like
if they're brought to the
we had-
table, which Trump doesn't want to do.
if we had asked, right, during the Korean War, like who was winning based on territory, there would be a point where North Korea had almost entirely taken South Korea. Almost entirely.
And
like
then we got
they had a small sliver of land, maybe a couple cities, maybe even one city left. And then that changed almost overnight. We could also look at Syria as another example where al-Assad owned almost all of it.
fuck
And then
Assad!
suddenly-
It's gone.
No more, right? So this idea that, they hold more territory right now is just not the metric that matters. Okay, $5 from Cameraman 502, because I still got some more money. Okay, if the impeachment was and we're going to go through these quickly, so don't spend 20 minutes on each $5 fucking donation, okay?
Sorry.
If the impeachment was so fatally flawed, guy whose names I can't pronounce should have come back and challenged the impeachment as a legal president. Thank you for the $5.
Just to be clear, like immediately following, he was like there's an arrest warrant and he feared for his life because his car was shot up. But anyway, continue.
Okay.
Yes,
$5 from
too
the
bad he
Tribune.
wasn't killed though.
for lactoid. Was January 6th justified? If so, why?
No,
Is Trump not having security guarantees with Russia's history showing America is not serious? Yes or no?
no, January 6th was not justified. And if it was as bad as Euromaidan, like when you look at the ratios and you look at what happened, then I think California would have a good argument to leave if they wanted to.
Okay. $10 from. Oh, I'm sorry. $5.
It wasn't
Oh,
bad,
wait.
by the
I
way. It
missed
was
a
the
lot.
best
Give me a
moment of
second.
my life.
Everyone.
Sorry, just wanted to
No, it's
stand
fine.
for Maidan a little bit.
$10 from Alexander Wynn. Without security guarantees, Ukraine would spend years rebuilding and depleting its rare earth resources while Russia fortifies its new territory and trains troops for a potential future invasion. Thank you for the $10. $2 from Tessica Johnson. Talk about today instead of decades-old history. Well, we're going to get to that
Thank
next
you.
question, I promise.
Please.
$5 from Levi. Wick, you did a great job keeping that under control. No, I did not, but that's okay. We're still going and we're still having fun, aren't we? Okay, $10 from Feder Methodist. One thing you're struggling with on your show is getting solid left-wing voices that are strong rhetorically and able to advocate their point of view without tossing insults and logical fallacy salads. Thank you for the $10.
I'm not left wing, for fuck's sake. I hope
I've been
you're-
Republican my whole
I'll
life.
be
I voted for
honest.
Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
I've been Republican my whole life.
To be fair, I was
I'm more
kind of
salty
close,
than
I'm sure.
usual.
Like,
That
what
is
is that?
true.
Take
But
that,
it's
Shatter.
tense times, okay? Tense times, okay?
I have been accused of being a commie. Alert!
Yep. I'm a George Soros actor now.
I'm not. Yeah.
$5 from Deej Nuts. At what point has the U.S. spent enough in aid to defend Ukraine to meet their obligations? Which is going to tie into the question, so hold off. $10 from the Justice 35. The pro-Russian argument is why can't Anna and her country just lose faster? Have you considered that your country isn't real? Ukraine can win this war. America and Europe should stop holding back. Thank you for the $10. 27 SEK to say Anna from Anna Holmgren to say what the fuck? Anna was there. Insult to say check Wikipedia. Thank you for the 27
Sorry,
SEK.
again? I didn't understand.
Well, I'll remember
No.
that.
I
Look,
thought they were backing you up.
anecdotes outweigh
They
evidence.
have your
Just
side.
remember
They're
that.
on your
Just
side.
remember that.
Okay. $5 from Justice
Oh,
35.
wow.
I love non-Ukrainians telling a Ukrainian about her country. LMAO.
Anecdotes
West
anecdotes are
Wing!
more important than evidence, apparently. But anyway, keep going.
Anna
No,
shouldn't
no,
say anything about the
no,
U.S. though.
Yeah.
Gifted
Read the
Wiki
wiki
TV
page.
memberships from Audacity.
And all the links.
Thank you for the gifted memberships. $5 from Audacity. I'm having a great time. Glad someone is. And then $5 from Justice 35 is the last one. And then we'll get to the question. The pro-Russian side be like, war bad. Ukraine should surrender. We need to appease Putin, man, because he's very scary. Effing clowns. Thank you for
Brilliant.
the $5. Let's talk about today.
Thank you.
I want
Let's.
to address this first to the Ukrainians and to the pro-Ukrainian side in this.
Just one
I
person.
thought to me. I'm
The
the only one.
pro-Ukrainian side in this. I'm expanding. Give me a second, right? Like,
I was like, oh no, I can't do that.
if America does continue on the course it is, where it stops funding, it stops all aid, right? It stops all aid, it stops all intelligence sharing, and continues to just withdraw of all support.
Mhm.
What does Ukraine do? What should Ukraine do? Can Ukraine still win? Go ahead. And how?
Well, that's the question.
What's the
Isn't
path
it?
to victory here, right?
That's the question, really. So the point of the blackmail, essentially, and the pressure, right, that Trump is now trying to do. Oh, I think fuck we're talking about now is that we really will struggle quite a bit. We rely quite a lot on Starlink. We rely quite a lot of of American intelligence. So obviously we have a lot of weaponry that is, for example, we can't even shoot Storm Shadows now, long-range missiles, without American intelligence, specifically because UK and France, who produce them, rely so much on United States for them to operate, which I hope will change in Europe. But that's just, the reality of the thing. So it's quite difficult, but we don't really have that much of a choice at the end of the day, because accepting surrender is not something that Ukrainian public will accept. We know how it looks. It's our lives. You guys, I appreciate, the emotional investment and the enthusiasm, but at the end of the day, it's us who are fighting and us who are dying, not any of you. Although Dylan and Andrew are honorary Ukrainians, obviously. But other than that, it's just that at the end of the day, it's quite difficult to say how it will look, specifically because it depends quite a lot on Europe. So whether Europe will be able to ramp up the production of their weaponry, maybe Turkey will join in some sort of fashion. They produce quite a lot of drones and helicopters and all that sort of thing, and they really want to kind of to be part of the European Union for a while, but they have been having problems getting there because they are authoritarian and they also kill a bunch of fucking Syrians and Kurds. But other than that, they have some quite troubles to join in the European Union, obviously, right? But at the end of the day, it's just totally depends on whether how much support we will be able to get to have leverage and to have strong positioning to negotiate, which is what the United States was supposed to guarantee us. We never asked for them to join the war, right? In sense of like adding us soldiers, how do you say, boots on the ground or whatever the fuck the phrase is, right? In the United States, nobody really ever asked them. Yeah, so it's really not about that. I don't think they should. It's not something I ever like expected them to do. But at with the withdrawal of like intelligence and of aid will harm us significantly, and it comes to a point: can we hold out long enough for European Union to help us instead? Because Europe has been over-reliant on the United States. For example, Germany has donated fuck all, essentially, to NATO, very little, and despite being one of the most prosperous countries in the European Union, right? So there has been a freeloading of the United States, definitely, especially since World War II and Cold War and all of that, established United States kind of like the leader of the Western world and the protector of Europe or whatever the fuck, right? And that history, I think, needs to die. It needs to change, and I hope Europe will come through. But problem with Europe is like a bunch of talk. Like everyone kind of knows that it's a bunch of like bureaucrats and talking and all of that. For example, there's just a little bit of a meme to diffuse the tension over here, okay? But back in the day when Russia attacked us in 2014, there was this joke that Russia would take all of Ukraine if it wasn't for Donetsk airport, because they couldn't move further because our volunteer battalions, cyborgs, they were called stopped them at Donetsk airport. So this is basically European Union, but with Orban. They would take the mantle of United States. They will be the leader of the Western world if it wasn't for that one Orban voting against them, So because of that, our future is really undecided, because I trust Europe just a little bit more than I trust the United States at this point under Trump, but which is not much.
Okay.
Which is not much,
hear
and I really don't know. I really don't know how it will look.
Sure. I want to hear from Dylan and Andrew on this, and I want to hear from the other side as well. So go ahead. Again, to remind you, if we continue down this course, if America continues down this course, cutting off all aid, cutting off all intelligence sharing, and basically withdrawing all support, 100%, what does the path to victory look like if you think Ukraine can still win?
Really quick, Dylan, I'll go. So with Europe really needs to step up. Like that's always been the argument. When we're having good faith arguments about Ukraine, Europe needs to step up their support significantly, more than just talk, more than just we're with you harder now because the U.S. has abandoned you. My opinion, I think European troops should go into Western Ukraine and protect and facilitate aid coming through from NATO European countries. And also that would protect some of the Western Ukrainian cities that get attacked by Iranian Shahed drones and etc. But for a victory, they will need significant European support in stepping up. But we've been advocating for that. Even when Biden was president, personally, I got involved with the Ukrainian Action Summit. I had to wear a suit and everything, go to Washington, and we tried to advocate for more aid because I felt Biden was not doing enough, because it wasn't, in my opinion. So I've been consistent on my position, at least when I talk about Ukraine, that it just has not been enough aid, regardless. So to win now without the United States, Europe has to do something beyond than just, hey, we're with you to the very end, harder. Or like it needs to be a significant step up, and I feel troops. I feel
Do you think they
European
will?
troops. That's the other. I don't know. They're not really showing a will right now. That's like showing me like that part's going to get there yet. I really, my analysis is on Action Wick. What their actions. I'm giving the analysis right afterwards, and I'm just not seeing that yet. Dylan.
Okay. Dylan, any thoughts on this?
Well, at this point, Ukraine faces the difficult position of surrendering now, conceding to Russian terms at the pushing of the United States, with the hope that a security guarantee that Trump has said would come after the peace agreement, which has not been outlined in any way, just like he said the healthcare plan would come, just like he said he'd end the war in 24 hours, just like he said all these other things. And our friends here today could not explain or could not give us an example of what would be, I guess, the more, we'll say, not Kiev shill version of a security guarantee. There's not a concept that has been drummed up yet. And so the Ukrainians face no security guarantees. The Russians could invade again in 3-4 years if Europe or the United States is distracted, say with a war in Taiwan or elsewhere, or fighting on without the support of the United States, which at this point was providing about 40% of, I believe, arms and munitions. Which is, I mean, it's not the majority, but it's still a sizable amount. It wasn't giving the majority financial aid. Europe had already long surpassed the United States. But it's not just a question of putting down dollars, because Europe has dollars. They have much more dollars than Russia. It's a question of having the industry to be able to take those dollars and convert them into shells, air defense systems, drones, and what's necessary to be on the battlefield. And if they want their dollars to be most effective, and the Europeans have already talked about this, first thing they need to do is they cannot buy as individual nation states. They have to buy as pan-European. It can't be individual nation-state artillery orders. It has to be pan-European artillery orders. Not only does that mean you can buy more in bulk, but it also means that each shell is going to cost less because it takes more time to start up the artillery production and it takes more time to low down the artillery production. If you buy in bulk, you'll be able to be more cost-effective. They're also going to make it so that they can lift the debt limit, which is something that's good. We're talking about a possible European plan of $800 billion being placed down, but that's dependent on individual European nation states increasing their defense spending by about 1.5%. And while we're hearing numbers like that, they still have to do it. They can't just talk about it. Also, there's going to have to be difficult political decisions. Investments need to be made where they're most cost effective. They cannot be made in whatever precinct in Paris, France is going to get you the most votes. They have to be put in locations where to be quite frank, the manpower costs are the lowest, the costs of production are the lowest, the red tape is the lowest, and you'll be able to get production up and running as fast as possible and be able to run it 7 days a week, 24 hours, different shifts. Because that's the type of attitude the Europeans need to take towards this if they're going to dream, let alone actually achieve, making up that 40% so Ukraine can have a strong enough negotiating position. They're also going to have to buy up whatever international stockpiles are left available. They cannot let the Russians outbid them. And they have to see if there's any way that they can work with Asian Pacific allies in the production of 155 standard NATO artillery ammunition, because they need more of those. Because if America spent aid to expand its artillery production to support these artillery systems, but if they're not sending aid, they have to get them from somewhere.
Do you think that'll happen? Honest Engine. Do you think that'll happen?
I honestly don't know. We'll have to wait and see. They've already made the decision about $800 billion investment. They've already made the decision about buying in bulk. They've already made the decision about the 1.5%. We're seeing some decisions be made. We're hearing what I think is of huge change, some serious discussion about sky defense. That means putting European jets over Lviv, over Odessa, over central Ukraine in order to protect Ukrainian industry and Ukrainian cities, now that the United States is no longer intelligence sharing or helping to protect them with air defense systems, meaning that the air defense systems we gave them are basically worthless now. Because, I mean, if we're not helping them with the technology, if we're not even doing the things that are no cost to us, that means they can't stop those missiles from hitting their children hospitals or apartments or military production, whatever it is, depending on how the Russians feel. So these are decisions that have to be made. Whether it'll be enough, the Ukrainians will have to wait and see, but they can't surrender or just pass down the struggle to their children, what Zelensky's already said he does not want to do.
Okay. Finish up and then
one sentence.
That's it. I've already said what I want to say.
Yeah, one sentence is just that the sentiment amongst the Ukrainians right now is just we need to hold out. Basically, we need to just to hold out and see what European Union will do, and afterwards we can really make any sort of decisions. Because as for now, like, words are just words at the end of the day. But we have made a contract with Baltics to make shared weaponry together, so hopefully that will bring some results, but to replace United States is quite difficult. So in that sense, we should wait. And Ukrainian soldiers on the front are like, well, we can wait out, I guess. That's the move.
One last thing, you gotta have to seize the $200 billion in Russian assets. It's right there. Seize it. It's in Brussels.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. To the other side, to the lactoid side. I'll call it the lactoid side. And this is to non-smoker first. I'll call it the non-smoker.
Non-smoker. Catching strays.
Lactoid
side.
Right. Let's say that the mineral deal is signed. There's a ceasefire agreement. Trump says, okay, there's peace now. We're going to secure that peace. What does Trump do, or what should Trump do? Or let me ask it this way. If Trump negotiates a ceasefire, he sets up security. He says, okay, we're going to protect you. We have our economic interests. We have the 50% mineral deal now in Ukraine. And then Putin breaks that deal. Should Trump put boots on the ground and attack Russia?
No, I mean definitely not. I think attacking Russia is a
Or push Russia
catastrophe.
out of Ukraine, out of where.
Potentially a catastrophe. I mean, you're talking the potential for nuclear war, worst case scenario, and even best case scenario. I mean, you don't want a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia or NATO and Russia. That's like a a war with a much greater reach than what we're seeing now, which means potentially many, many, many more people dying. Which is why I think the U.S. should not be involved in security guarantees in Ukraine. I think the U.S. should pull out entirely. All aid, just get out of there.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to kind of go into what you asked these guys, but, look, I think that Dylan is right that European investment does indicate that there's a concerted belief in Europe that continuing to fund this conflict might give Ukraine a fighting chance, and maybe they do have a fighting chance. I mean, I've argued with my own community, as small as it is. I've argued with them about this a lot. I do think the Russian military is underperformed. I don't think anyone can argue that relative to the expectations of not just the Russians, but the West as well. There's always a chance, but realistically, I think, we've contributed more than any other country to Ukraine's defense. Us pulling out entirely does not bode well for them. I see the conflict ending at best in a couple months, with Ukraine having to sign a peace agreement on worse terms than what they would have to agree to now. And as a side note, the mineral deal, I mean, from what I understand, from everything I'm reading, a big piece came out in Bloomberg recently that the minerals in Ukraine might not be anywhere near as valuable as they were thought to be initially anyway. I mean, I think that was the Trump administration viewed that as sort of a bargaining chip for Ukraine, in a sense of like, hey, maybe we'll give you a slightly better peace terms, but you have to surrender. And that's why there was that whole clash at the White House, because I think the Ukrainian side felt, okay, if we're going to give you these minerals, you're going to continue funding our defense. And the Trump administration, they're just not interested in doing that. They are interested in the new Monroe Doctrine. They want to annex Greenland and the Panama Canal. They want us to secure our hemisphere. They are concerned somewhat about China and the Middle East. They are totally content in pulling out of Europe. I mean, that's what Pete Hegseth said. They're not committed to Europe's defense at all. And I think that's the reality of it. So, yeah.
Okay, Lactoid, same question. If Trump does what he says and sets up a deal, would you support, if Russia violates the deal, for Trump to send military forces to punish Russia?
Not boots on the ground. I would support harsher, a relatively harsh response from the U.S.
Such as, give me an example.
So what's likely going to happen is when peace is reached and if we're talking about post-peace because of this mineral deal, right? It's part of the hypothetical. Then a lot of the sanctions on Russia are going to be lifted, right? And so you're going to see kind of a resurgence of their economy in a lot of ways, and also the global economy is going to benefit a lot from that. It's going to have a deflationary effect because of the access to raw minerals and other resources. I mean, there's going to be the looming threat of not only are we going to reimpose all of those, we're going to impose more if we even can, and I mean, maybe even directly challenging Russian assets in different countries like Africa, perhaps. I mean, there's things, Wagner, there's things we could do that are short of boots on the ground, direct confrontation with a conventional military. Because I agree
And to be clear, you would not support that, even if the deal's reached and even if Russia violates that deal.
A direct conflict with a nuclear powers conventional military? No. This is one of the things that needs to be avoided.
Okay.
But
And just to be
that's why
clear,
we shouldn't sign
when
anything.
it comes to Ukraine, the prospects, I think, of peace. I just want to respond to, I guess, your prior question as well. If the U.S. pulls out entirely, whether the U.S. stays or whether the U.S. pulls out, I don't think it's going to. It might change the rate, but I don't think it's going to change the sort of inevitability of what's going to be happening, which is it because of the manpower issues that Ukraine's having. You're going to see a overall kind of a piece by piece movement west in Ukraine by the Russian military. Some things that could change that would be, I would agree if the Europeans start sending actual troops to Ukraine, which if they did, we would have to have some kind of understanding that we're not going to, like, they can't trigger Article 5 if their troops get hit or something, like even in transit or something along those lines, right? Because otherwise that's a big deal. And or if Ukraine lowers their conscription age to 18, which I think is horrific for other reasons, right? I mean, right now, again, they're having to like pull up in vans and grab people off bicycles and away from their families and throw them to the front line.
Can I
And so
address that?
if
It's
they got to
annoying.
do it to 18-year-olds, I mean, that's going to be even more horrific.
Did he answer the question?
Please. He
did.
brought it up two
Quickly
times.
you can, you can address it, but just to before you do, this is the order of operations here. I'm going to let you respond. I'm going to let you have a response to those guys, and have a back and forth perhaps, and then we're going to get to closings. And as we're doing this, I'm going to share a link in chat because some of you have asked me, like, where can I donate to help Anna's funds and things like that.
Oh,
She
thank you.
does fundraisers sometimes. So I'm going to put a link to her Twitter. I asked her. She said she doesn't have a current one going, but I'm going to link you to her
Tomorrow.
Twitter. Oh,
I will start one tomorrow.
yeah.
Fundraiser
There
tomorrow.
you go.
Yeah.
So if you want to donate to her, that will be how you can do that. You can click on the link and follow her Twitter, and she will announce that on her Twitter.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll do that as we go. But respond to that, and then you get back and forth. Then we'll get to closing. Cool. Go.
Just one. I don't want to respond to anything like the major points they brought up, but I just want to say, like, this point about dragging people off the streets is like annoying the fuck out of me. Americans bring it up every time. You dragged people out of the streets to go to Vietnam that didn't attack you. You drafted people.
that was
You
fucked
thrown
up.
them in jail. We are defending ourselves. Every war has conscription. Every single war. There hasn't been a single war without conscription. Up to sorry, I'm drunk. Up to 23, like 22 and 23, we didn't have even mobilization. We basically had just volunteering people. Most of people have been in 22 have volunteered to be enlisted and defend their country. That's one thing. Second thing, we have the most softest mobilization on earth because United States, by the way, demanded we dropped our age to 18, conscription age, right?
It's fucked up.
Zelensky refused. Zelensky refused because he said, like, I don't have arms to give to people that are already at the front. Why the fuck should I throw 18-year-olds out there? And it's fucked up, yes, but most countries have conscription age of 18 years old. And we don't. Most of our people who are fighting went there voluntarily. Most people I know personally went there voluntarily as well. And yes, mobilization is a thing that happens when a country is invaded. And I fucking hate all of you that you bring this up as some sort of like Zelensky is dragging people to a meat grinder. No, he's not. The invader is.
Wrong.
Putin is dragging people to the meat grinder. It's just absolutely disgusting. Most of my fellow Ukrainians hate this point the most because it's our brothers, it's our fathers, it's our husbands, it's our lovers, it's our friends that being mobilized, and this point annoys the fuck out of the people exactly because this is normal. We are not doing anything abnormal.
Let me respond. Right. So drafts are bad. Right. Drafts suck.
They're not. If you're invaded,
not if you're invaded.
So does taxes. So do tons of responsibilities to the state.
You're right. Taxes suck. So drafting. I mean, draft is one of the most awesome powers of the state. You're talking about essentially slavery in one of the most violent and dangerous professions you can have.
It's not slavery. It's
slavery.
Hold on. Yes,
holy
drafting
shit.
is essentially slavery into
Wrong.
the most dangerous profession.
My soldiers will barf.
When I say hold on, that means let me finish a sentence.
The army that beat Hitler was a slave.
I'm not going to allow you to lie about my military like that. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, let him speak. We are distracting him. Yeah, he's annoying, but we are not letting him speak. Yeah, let's speak.
Oh, Jesus Christ! So. Slavery is the forced labor of somebody that does not want to do a particular job. Conscription is you grab somebody and force them to do a particular job that they don't want to do. This one being direct fighting, warfare, with another country in this case. It is definitely akin to slavery. I understand that countries do it. It's an incredibly awesome power.
Everyone does
awful. Hold on, it's awful. I understand. When you look at Vietnam, that was awful. And you look at the real human tragedy of all the Americans who were forced into that Satan's armpit and died there against their will. That sucks. And that is a human tragedy that's worthwhile of taking a look at and saying, everybody in the world can stand up and say, that's fucked up. Like, yeah, there's an argument over
what do we do when
there's
we're
an argument
invaded?
over whether or not it's a necessity. It is fucked up and it's awful. Now, when you're simultaneously making the argument, well, you foreigners should, this is what the Ukrainian people want. You foreigners shouldn't even be able to have an opinion on this, right? This sort of appeal to anecdote, this sort of appeal to identity. A lot of Ukrainians don't want to be fighting.
Here,
and by the way, plenty of Ukrainians, the ones being dragged off the street and shipped to the front line, they don't want to be fighting. They want peace.
They're not.
I can point that out. I can point that out. They are. They're sent to the front line.
What do you mean you can point that out? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I'll explain exactly what it means. What it means is, despite the fact that I'm not a Ukrainian, I get to care about human life in other countries. That's what it means.
Oh, damn.
Wow.
Like, I'm about to
I know. Wild concept.
Oh.
Listen. How it works in actual reality, not this shit. Like actual reality. We have an app called Dia. You have to register there, and to be part of the called upon forces. You're not immediately thrown at the front, but you have to be registered as a potential reserve. Because people who have volunteered, my friends, people who I care about, I have been there for ages without rotation. They need to be replaced at some fucking point, okay? Because they made the sacrifice of going there voluntarily. And for a year and a half, the rest of us enjoyed that privilege of not being there because they volunteered to be there. So the least any decent man in this country can do is register as per law, martial fucking law, in the program and be in that list of people who are potentially be called upon. If you are caught by a police or by our TCK people, which I don't know how to say in English, I apologize, but basically people who are doing the recruitment, right? If they stop you on the street and you show them that you are registered, you're not going to be dragged anywhere. You're not going to be dragged fucking anywhere. People who are being dragged are not registered. They are breaking the law by not being registered, and that's why they dragged places, because they break the law.
Lactoid. I got a question for Lactoid. I got a question. Lactoid, you voted for Trump, right? I voted for him, so it's fine. Okay. Do you consider yourself a patriot, like a blood-red, white, and blue patriot? Do you?
Wait, did you vote for Trump? Hold on, Andrew.
I did. 2016.
Oh, that's awesome.
2016.
Oh, I was about to say. I was gonna be like,
just to be clear, I voted for the
I was the Maryland State Director
I
for the
voted for
Trump
the
campaign.
Libertarian Party in 2016 and 2020.
Okay. So you believe in so you believe in like self-defense and preservation and everything and all that, right?
I'm not like, despite the fact that I have an American flag behind me, like I care about ideals and I care about the Constitution and I care about all those things. But like this sort of like blind nationalism, I'm not like that. I'm not like MAGA.
It's not okay.
That kind of person.
Anyways, okay. So your opinion on the military? You just said it's like slave labor, and you're basically going into slavery and like
conscription is, yes.
So that is what is required upon. That's not addressing what I'm. So you had the opinion of the whole military because you were bringing it back to like Vietnam when America conscripted people, and
He was talking about the draft.
I was talking about the draft. The people who are forced against their will to go do a job are essentially slaves of the state. Yeah.
They're serving in the same military so I volunteered, right? So I volunteered to join. Somebody that would be conscripted, they might outrank me. What the fuck are you talking about? They get into the military and then they work their way up and they outrank me.
The farmers that chose to be farmers are not slaves. The farmers who did not choose to be farmers but are forced to be farmers are slaves. Does that make sense?
Lactoid, what happens? You invaded. What
you're
happens?
not making sense.
You're not conscripting people. To explain.
Andrew.
Explain.
I don't know.
Just say the word.
Andrew,
What happens?
Do you honestly think that people being conscripted are like treated differently than people that are already like in the military and then volunteer?
No, their service is not fucking voluntary. That's the difference.
Wait. What do you think the definition of slavery is? Just out of curiosity.
I'm not going to litigate slavery definition with you. I'm talking about when a country is invaded and men or whoever
Dude, they're
else is
being
needed to be
forced to
called
do
to defend their
something.
country because they're being
I'm sorry,
invaded.
World War
They are
II.
being
World War II
invaded.
soldiers, were they slaves? In
Dude,
your
you
opinion,
talking
were
there's
they?
about?
cases
Marine,
where
just out of
conscription, and
curiosity.
you could even argue conscription is defensible. That's what Anna is saying.
It is.
But to say,
It
Lacroix's
is.
point is that conscription, forced conscription, he's equating it to slavery because it's not voluntary fucking service. It's not that complicated.
Because
Thank
when
you.
you're
Thank you.
if
invaded,
I may,
there's
just a moment.
martial law.
If I
People's
may,
freedoms are removed.
okay,
That's the reality
just a
of
moment.
war. Are you
Yes,
insane?
it is involuntary, right? They are taken against their will, but they're also paid, right? So it's not the same.
Whoa,
It's
whoa,
not
whoa!
all
Even the slaves were
precisely
Not
paid
at
in like
all.
food and shelter.
How
So
much? How much?
The
of
voluntary
labor
aspect is what matters.
South?
It's the voluntary
Bro,
aspect that
the
How
matters.
much
slaves
were
were
the slaves
paid.
in
You
the
can
South
pay
paid?
The
slaves.
slaves were
So
paid.
you can understand.
You can pay slaves, and it's
hold
still
on.
Jesus
wrong.
Christ.
It's still
Blackwood,
slavery.
okay.
Wait. You're
Blackwood,
totally
let
off
me
base.
finish my point, and then you can
Well,
respond.
your point.
Cool?
The
You
slaves.
don't
It
know
doesn't
my
matter if
point.
you pay them or
I'm
not.
finished.
It matters whether or not it's voluntary labor or not. That's what makes slavery.
What should happen?
Okay.
What should happen?
Whatever.
Also,
You're
I
invaded.
just
What should happen?
Anna, why are you appealing to the law when you don't? When in 2014, apparently the law didn't matter because
We're
of
not
freedom.
going back to 2014. We're not going
Sorry.
back to
There
2014.
are
Wait, go ahead.
different levels
I'm not
of
gonna acknowledge that bullshit. Answer my question,
when we
Jesus
try
please.
to
Christ.
when we bring up this is the reason I have a problem with what Lactoid said, and I know I'm interjecting a little bit. Fair enough. I've stayed about
All right.
4
Okay.
versus 2.
Here's
That's an answer.
right? Here's my problem, right? Is you use this hyperbolic worst case scenario language to try to paint something as far worse than it is. I'm
It's
not saying
horrible.
that conscription is good. Please let me finish. I'm not saying
What do you know
conscription
about
is
it?
good.
Yeah, what
I'm
do you even
not
know
saying
about
that
it
it's
at
a
all?
good
You know
thing.
nothing
However,
about
what
it.
I am saying
fuck?
is that when you try to paint it, when you especially you tell a mostly American audience, like they are slaves. Do you know what imagery you're evoking? You know
Yes.
what imagery you're evoking?
I do,
is
and
the
it's justified.
Battle slavery of the
No,
South,
it's not.
which
It's
is
not.
an
What kind of
You have no idea
slave
what
entirely
you're
do they
different
talking about.
say?
thing
The-
than
the-
what it is that is conscripted.
I said it about
Ukrainian
Vietnam
folk
too.
music.
We're taking the
We don't call them
trench. Like,
slaves.
what
we
are they
call them
singing?
conscripts for a reason because they're not the fucking
Oh,
same.
you're right. We use a different
But-
word for it. I guess it
They
must be
sing
different now.
Ukrainian black metal.
That's awesome.
What?
Yeah. Listen,
fuck with
the
that.
That's
American conscripts that were dying in Vietnam, that were
Russia would've
there
already
against their
retreated.
will, that absolutely
Not the
was
same.
slavery.
We're
Yes, of course it
defending
was.
ourselves.
It's
It is
not the same.
Dylan, you want to get in
Jesus.
here? Go ahead.
So I've okay, I'm gonna be blunt. I spend most of my time in Ukraine with draft dodgers. Okay, they tend to have a lot of fun, and they dodge the draft. And I've interviewed a few of them. I'm actually gonna release an article with a guy who joined the 155 in France as it was decaying and becoming the disaster it was around Pacross. We're gonna be releasing that with Offbeat Research in the near future. So I think I understand the psychology of a lot of these draft dodgers pretty well because I talk to them quite a lot about it. And from my conversations with them, a lot of them think that if they go into the armed forces, they're going to be put in some LADA. They're going to be driven to the front with bad gear, with not good, maybe not even good enough training because the manpower crisis is bad. But they're not going to have the basic gear necessary to protect themselves. Air defense systems, an armored vehicle instead of having to drive to
That's
the
the main
front on
argument,
your
yeah.
mom's pickup truck or
Yes.
whatever, right? This type of stuff scares them. And when I'm interviewing a lot of these people who were either in the army and left, a lot of it has to do with fear about not having the proper gear, and a lot of the people who don't want to join. And so I would say from the majority of cases I've interacted with draft dodgers, a lot of them would potentially join if the Ukrainian armed forces was well supported enough that they'd be able to get good gear. A lot of them, but there is also a portion of them that would never join because warfare is not for everyone. To hear that buzz over your head, to hear the shells whizzing over your head, that shit's terrifying, man. It chills you. And so for some people, they'll break down. I've heard these stories. I've seen people break down. It's not for everyone. And so I understand, and I'm sympathetic to a lot of these people who dodge the draft, but we also need to understand that Ukraine is a country that is 1/4 the size of Russia when it comes to population. 1/4, 1/5 the size of Russia, right? And when we talk about these early volunteers, where does the burden of freedom lay? Does it lay at the people who made those sacrifices early on, continue to make those sacrifices? She said a year and a half. There have been people on the front line for 3 years. Basically
Yes.
nonstop because there's no rotation options.
Without
While other
rotation.
people are far from the front. But then you go to those people who are far from the front, you go to Ukrainian society and you ask them, should we surrender to Russia? They say no. They say they're willing to negotiate. They say they're even willing to talk. But 91% of them are not willing to talk if the Ukrainians are not there and their interests are not considered. And so people are not joining voluntarily, but they're willing to continue the war. And so if that's what the society says, if you say that as a citizen, we should keep fighting, but I'm not going to join right now, having a system that says, fine, you don't have to join right now, but if we need you, we're going to call upon you, is the best system that has been developed when it comes to nation states like this. Name me any small nation state that's smaller than its neighbors that would be able to survive if they completely got rid of manpower, like constraints. If they are surrounded by hostile neighbors and they said, you know what, no draft, our enemies can draft and attack us, Russia can draft people, we won't draft people, these nation states would not exist. Right? It's very difficult trying to figure out where the lie of freedom and like non-freedom lays when you're trying to defend a country that wants to stay free. But Abraham Lincoln had to make these tough decisions during the Civil War, and the Ukrainians have had to make these tough decisions. And calling it slavery or evil or bad, draft is bad, but you don't have to make bad decisions when you're in good situations. They've been invaded.
My whole point, just to be clear, my whole point, and I think, Dylan, you're getting it more than Mercado has. But my point here is not that like there is never any acceptable circumstance to have drafting, in this case slavery. You can think of circumstances in which it might be
like getting invaded by a nation that wants to erase your nation off the planet.
You can look at that, but that doesn't change the fact that it is a humanitarian and horrible humanitarian crisis and a horrible situation that anybody can look at and
that's the same thing as saying war is bad. That is the same thing as saying.
Can I get through the whole fucking day?
We do gotta let Lackoid finish. Lackoid finish, please.
I've been very respectful, Wick, to these people. Okay, all I'm saying is that when you look at situations like this, like drafts should be a absolute last resort. They should be intensely scrutinized. They should always be under review. They should not be treated flippantly. And you can't say, like, when push comes to shove, if you have to, like, you're having manpower issues and you have to force people into the military, it undermines this argument of like, well, the Ukrainian people want to fight, like we want to organize and fight back. Like, yeah, there's some, but there's a whole bunch of people who don't, and those individuals, like, their choice should be factored into the calculation.
But if we were to make this, if we were to make this comparison, though, right? The majority. If we're to make this comparison, though, in World War II, after Pearl Harbor, the vast majority of Americans wanted to go and beat up the Japanese, right? Yeah. We got to go there. We had the fucking cool Disney cartoons, super racist, whatever. Anyway, when that was happening, right? When that was happening, do you think if you went door to door and said, sir, it's time for you to go to Iwo Jima? I don't think most people would sound very excited. Most would probably say no. That's why 62% of Americans during World War II who served in the armed forces were drafted. That was a difficult decision we made as a nation because we believed we had to respond after we were attacked, and we felt like liberating Europe was something that was within our interests, and some would even argue it was the right thing to do, right? Now, Ukraine has been invaded. Ukraine is making difficult decisions. And you say, oh, it needs review. The fact that we're having a discussion about mobilizing 18-year-olds when a regime that probably didn't care about its own people would have long ago said, of course, the 18-year-olds are the youngest, they're the healthiest, get them straight to the front. We have them in the university classes. We can literally go to their college classes, pick them out of the rooms while they're having the classes, and line them up onto the buses. They know where they are. Exactly. So they could make these decisions. They've chosen not to because they care about the demographic future of the state through the post-Soviet birth collapse.
There's also a political aspect of that, just to be clear.
There's also a political aspect, but to be clear, that same
incredibly
scenario,
unpopular to draft 18-year-olds.
It would be unpopular, but it's also the situation where it would be a question of, well, what do the Ukrainian people want? Because if the Ukrainian people are saying the majority want to continue to fight, then they're also going to have to make difficult decisions to continue that fight. Just like if you would have asked the majority of Americans during World War II, hey, do you like all these sacrifices we're going to have to make with this program and that program? You're going to have to buy this bond or that bond. Most Americans would probably say no. But if they want to carry out the war, those are the necessary sacrifices you have to make. And the majority of Ukrainians are not willing to surrender, so they make these decisions.
I understand your point, and I don't disagree that like the sort of like stated idealistic will of the people is obviously going to be relevant to the calculation. All I'm saying is that what's also relevant to the calculation is casualties, and what's also relevant to the calculation is how many people are being forced to potentially be casualties or be casualties against their will, right? This does matter to the calculation when we're talking about whether, like, how should we pursue peace and the urgency of how we should be approaching peace.
I agree.
I don't know the answer.
On the condition. Last thing I'll say. I agree. It'll be 5 seconds.
Because I want to know.
But I'll wrap. I won't talk for the next 5 minutes. I promise. At least 5 minutes.
There's no way.
Okay. I'll agree with this on the condition that we hold the same standard to the Russians. The fact that their soldiers that are joining at the end of 2024 that are volunteering for these big $30,000 down payment contracts, which goes really fucking far in Russia, they're 50 years old. So if we cheat that same like, ooh, we have to make the decision about peace. We have to put that on the Russians too. We can't pretend that their manpower crisis is good just because they pretend it is.
Okay,
Wait,
can I
let me
ask?
respond to that.
No, hold on. No, stop,
God
because
damn it,
this
Wick.
is a question pertinent because it
Okay,
matters.
We were
How much of
finally
the
building
Ukrainian
ground.
forces is conscripted? How much? What's the percentage?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
I know a significant number.
I would like to know.
I don't,
Because
by the way,
I
don't even know
read-
if Ukraine knows the specific amount
Can
at
I
this point.
say?
Yeah. Oh,
Like
do
the
you know?
exact
Anna?
number is not allowed, is not like actually accessible. But what is accessible is in 22 and 23, the 75% of people were volunteers, around that number, and then afterwards there has to be mobilization. We don't have total mobilization, by the way. Still, we have partial mobilization, and that has been people have been drafted since then because of you can only have so much volunteers, people. It's reality. Like, look at the map of how many people in Europe right now want to defend their country if it's attacked. It's never above 50%. The only mad lads that are above 50% are us and Finns, okay? Finland and Ukrainians are two people who are above 60%. Finlands are mad. They have like 70% of people who said they want to defend their country. And the most people are below fucking 30, right? They're below 20. There's never ever been a thing when you're attacked and everyone's like, yes, I want to go on the front lines. Most of my friends who are currently not on the front lines, which by the way, you push that propaganda lactoid, but if you go outside in the cities, men everywhere, okay? In Ukraine, in Kharkiv, in Kiev, men everywhere walking around. Not all men are thrown to the fucking meat grinder. Most of them are going to work. Most of them are doing their thing. Only 1 million people right now are at the front. Half at the front, half reserve out of that 1 million people. So we have much more people than 1 million, I assume, right? And it's just that most people are not even thrown at the front lines. They have to be registered. I want to again appeal to that.
Right?
Yes, you have to be registered by law, and in the program, hold DIA. So if you're not registered, then you have trouble. That's what I pointed out, and nobody wants to address it because it's just fact you can't say anything about. And if most of my friends who are not fucking dodgers, okay, are registered, they go to work every day, and if they're stopped
Hang with a bad
by
crowd.
you do actually, Dylan. Fuck you with the fucking drafters. I hang out with soldiers, okay? So anyhow, point is that Dylan aside, right? You actually show people the app, and you show you're registered, and that's it.
Mhm.
Okay? If you're not, then you are arrested and unfortunately dragged, which you probably saw in the videos you're talking about.
Many videos,
That happens definitely. Yeah, because they are breaking the law during the martial law of all times. Okay, so do I want my loved ones and my friends and everyone to be on the front line? No, I don't. Do they have to?
Either.
Yes.
Be on the front line.
I really, honestly, just don't believe you and don't care. To be quite
You're disingenuous as hell.
Yeah, you're right.
Like,
You're
not.
Ceasefire. That's entirely disingenuous. I don't actually.
Yeah, without security guaranttees, it means nothing. Without security guarantees, it means nothing.
I want to.
It's just words.
I want to respond to Dylan.
They want the children to be okay. That's fine. That's fine. No problem.
Dylan,
help me.
I want to. He's on your side. Oh my!
I
could be way more mean than I'm gonna be. Okay, I'm a very nice guy. Dylan, going back to when you said you can criticize Russia for the same thing. I think that Russia's manpower issues, largely because it's a larger country, are not the same kind of issues that Ukraine is facing. But I will agree with one thing, which is that the Russian conscripts, the Russians that have been drafted and also thrown into combat, I feel incredibly bad for them. And I feel sorry for them. And I think that's like a black mark on the Russian state as well. And the fact that a lot of them are dying,
not the actual
war.
And a lot of them who have died or are dying, right? I think that's a tragedy. And I want to say on both sides, by the way, because both sides I've seen do this sort of war porn that's been going on Twitter, where people like call the Russians orcs, or
Oh
the
my
Russians will
God.
call the Ukrainians
Jesus.
pigs, and like they'll insult each other. When some of those soldiers like didn't even choose to be there, and they're pleading for their lives when bombs are falling on them, and then you're gonna like people are gonna celebrate this, then at the same time say that I don't care about human life. It's
You
really
don't.
disgusting. Really, really
Lactoid,
gross.
haven't you considered that war is actually good?
I know.
Okay, so
I want
War
invaders to
is
blow
bad. I'm
the
glad
fuck
we're at the
up.
same point when I joined. We're
Okay,
at the same
that's
point.
No,
fine.
no, you're
War
right,
is
dude.
bad.
War is good. You've convinced
Answer the
me.
question. Answer
I'm
the
not
question,
trying to.
Dylan, and then we're gonna wrap up.
So
Okay.
I agree that Russia's a
Thank you.
bigger country.
I
They have
can't
more
anymore.
people, right? But I also don't think like, and this is not an insult. This is just something I really want to get across to people. War is not like a spreadsheet, right? It's not as simple as Russia has these many people, Ukraine has these many people, Russia wins. Then you could like avoid the whole war altogether if it was as simple as that. But Japan has beaten Russia. The Chechens have beaten Russia before. They've lost wars before, so it isn't simple as like a spreadsheet. And so I think there's more to it. For example, I do think that the Ukrainians probably have much more of a will to fight than the Russians, honestly speaking.
Yes.
When it comes to how
Obviously.
much their society and their everyday life can be disturbed by the war, I think the Ukrainians, from their 12-hour-a-day blackouts, from the constant bombings that they have to deal with in major metropolitan areas and not largely just oil refineries, like from the they have largely shown themselves to be willing to put up with a lot and stay within the country. Where the Russian public, while the war continues to spill over more, have been largely sheltered from the effects of the war. While some of the economic effects are starting to break through, even despite the efforts of the Russian government, I do think when we talk about manpower, the Ukrainians do have more will when it comes to that, and there is less of a manpower requirement for the defender than there is the attacker. So making just a cold, calculated, like, plus the Russian attack strategy is literally attack, 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 attack. Like, so their
Meat
way
wave,
of pressure is dependent upon being willing to take high casualties, right? So I don't think it is as simple as Russia has more people. Therefore, when you make this calculation, it's part of the reason why they have to pay like $30,000 down payments. That's crazy. That's the type of stuff that will bankrupt Russia when it comes to their long-term, like, social services they're going to have to provide to all these veterans for the next 40, 50 years. So I do think that when we talk about the manpower problem with the Russians, sometimes we undersell exactly how negative it could be. And we talk about, and none of this is about being a black spot when it comes to the draft. I agree that the draft is bad, but I'm not trying to talk about like, oh, see, the Russians are also bad. See, everyone's bad. My point is the Russians are going to do the draft no matter what moral argument we make. We can come out with the Bible. We can come out with, Rousseau and Voltaire would have disagreed. No, they don't give a fuck. Right? They're going to draft people if it means that they can attack and do these invasions and conquer territory or achieve their objectives. And so, as a smaller nation, to restrict yourself from the draft in a situation like this is national suicide. And so, Ukraine made the very difficult decision of having to engage in a sad practice that has been, kind of standard across the globe for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it hasn't really been.
So
Okay.
there was another thing I was going to say, but I'll just let it go.
Okay. Well, you'll get closing, so maybe you'll remember it, right? Gang, this has been a discussion, gang. Okay, a discussion of all discussions. Okay. This is an ongoing situation. There's a lot of moving parts. Tomorrow might make all these points moot as Trump decides to change his fucking mind, or Finland Poland decides to, okay, we're just going into Ukraine now. We don't know. We don't know what's coming, is what I'm saying. The fog of war is thick, and we can never predict the future. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for engaging in this rousing debate. And I want to give each of you a chance to shout yourselves out, tell people where they can find you. I have links to all of them in my YouTube description. If you've enjoyed this content, like and subscribe. Anna, I'll let you go first. Closing thoughts.
No, damn. Well, this is like about as exhausting as it usually is. My real life is life in war, and all of my probably closest people are at the front right now. So that's what I care about, and nothing has been accomplished in this fucking debate as it usually is, but I just am here because Wick is cool and he asked me to. Okay, that's the only reason. And I'm tired, to be honest with you. This is like a little bit emotional, but I'm tired of this like retarded ass regurgitation of everything we heard bajillion times. We don't really need any of that at the time like this. All of my people want is to know where the fuck we stand in terms of like support. In terms of support of United States, it's quite clear where this is going if you have fucking eyes, and you can see that Trump is basically Russia's bitch at this point. So I really hope that Europe comes through and they see what we all have told them. Western Europe and Eastern Europe are two very different things, to be honest with you all. I know Americans don't really understand that, but Eastern Europe has never been treated like equal or like a partner or like anything of that sort. And I do hope there is a future where that's true. And it is, in my opinion, up to the Europe to decide, not to United States, because I do agree with like a lot of United States people who say that why the fuck Europe is not paying like as much as the United States is paying for NATO and all of that. I do agree with that, because at the end of the day, it's our fucking continent and it's our fucking nemesis that occupied half the fucking Europe before, and it's really like up to Europe to decide, and I hope they will. I hope they will decide for once not to fuck us over. Holy shit. Like Eastern Europe has been historically thrown to the wolves like more times than I have fingers to count. And I do hope people realize that we need to put a fucking end to it. We are not Russian hostages. We are people. We're people with our own national identities. We're people with our own drive. And we are people who deserve to have everything else that everyone else has, okay? And I really want that to happen, but we shall see. As far as the United States go, I don't know. I am of the opinion that they're not an ally, and there won't be. So we should rely on ourselves and on Europe to figure out what's next in this fucking world, okay?
Okay. Gang, I've provided a link to her Twitter where you can go. You can follow her. She will have a fundraiser apparently tomorrow, and if you want to donate to her, I
Yes,
encourage you to
thank
do
you.
so. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry it's exhausting, but I do
It
appreciate
is,
you
yeah.
coming. So thank you. Non-smoker, go ahead.
Yeah, twitch.tv/non_smoker. So, yeah, a few things. I mean, despite what everybody thinks of me at the end of these panels every single time, I'm really not like super pro Russia. I've just, I have a dissenting view on the war. I would call it that. And I don't support the U.S. funding the Ukrainian war effort. I think it was a mistake from the beginning. I happen to think the war is tragic, and the Russians winning, which I think is an inevitability. I don't celebrate that. I'm not happy about that. I don't feel, in any way like even. I don't know. I don't think that's a positive outlook for the world moving forward. Not because it's Russia, but just the fact that we're breaking down into massive scale wars and spheres of influence developing that are, I don't know, rubbing up against one another violently. I think is like bad for everybody. So yeah, I mean, I'm pro peace. I despite what Andrew says, I think war bad. I don't know. I think it should be avoided at all costs. That said, I understand the Ukrainian position in wanting to fight for their sovereignty. I just don't think that the U.S. supporting it has anything to do with Ukrainian sovereignty. I think it's that the U.S. views Ukraine as an opportunity to hurt our adversary. And that's all it's ever been. And Ukraine got rugged. And I think that that was the plan all along. And it sucks. This is sort of our thing. We do this time and time and time again all over the world. And we're probably going to continue to do it. And so I oppose that. One last thing, I'm totally open to any 1v1s. I'm way more rational than I might seem to be on here. So please, if anyone's interested in that, hit me up.
Well, thank you for being here. Link to his channel is in my YouTube description. Check him out. Andrew Mercado, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again, Wick, for having me on Mercado Media. So, if anything, today we learned just rehashing of the same narratives. It's just kind of like feelings without facts. War is bad. That's why Russia should stop doing it. Russia should stop carrying out wars so that way we can have peace. Because unless Russia stops their consistent invasions of countries, we're going to continuously have to keep defending the countries that are being invaded. It's too bad we didn't give as much support to Georgia or Chechnya and really laid a framework to really stand up against this before Russia put soldiers soldiers in Donbass and Crimea, and then did a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We really should. We were really weak on that. I do agree with Anna. Europe needs to step up significantly. I've always said that. Like, it is their backyard. Ukraine is literally like the shield for Europe right now, fighting against these Russian orcs that are trying to take over their country. And if Europe doesn't step up and significantly do what, if it's really like a threat on democracy, they need to act like it. Okay, they really need to. And that's still, with all of my criticisms of the U.S. pulling out and how bad it is, and the precedent that it sets, all is still valid. It's like two things can be true at the same time, right? Nuance is very important. Multiple reasons. Russia's feelings, I don't give a fuck. Russia continues imperialist invasions of independent sovereign nations. You know, we signed multiple security agreements with Ukraine. The U.S. did, to defend them if they're attacked. It is up to us to follow through with those agreements. So, and also, there will be no peace in Ukraine without security guarantees. Unless Ukraine has a solid foundation, not just words, not just a document that's signed by Russians, because they break every document ever. It needs to be solid security, something that Ukrainians are comfortable with, because that's what actually matters. Okay. Thank you again, Wick, for having me on. Mercado Media on YouTube and social media. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Links to his stuff is in my YouTube description. Dylan Burns, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just it's kind of very disappointing. I mean, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's not to be expected to see all this talk about like peace through strength, but then the entirety of a negotiating strategy is just giving Russians whatever they want, just conceding on every term before the negotiations have even started. We don't know if the kidnapped children are being returned. We don't know if there's going to be an all-for-all POW exchange. We don't know if the Russians are ever going to stop hunting civilians in Kherson. The drone attacks are only escalating. I don't see any effort by Trump to really undercut Russia's ability to make war. And one question I would leave the viewers with is, has there been a single thing that Trump has done that has made it more difficult in any way for the Russians to carry out the war? And I think the answer to that is no. If anything, everything he has done has made it easier for them to carry out the war. America has made French bravery shine by comparison, which is, not necessarily the easiest thing. And I just do want to throw out there that the inevitability of Russian victory, the inevitability of Russian conquest, I don't think it's real. I also don't think that the inevitability of the rug pull is real. I think that we accept these things are real because it's easier to accept that we're powerless, to accept that we can't really do anything, that these historical trends are going to end up to this point, that there was no way for the Russians to lose this war, because look at the spreadsheet. I mean, then they obviously must have won the First Chechen War. They obviously should have beaten the Japanese when they fought the war with the Japanese. The war with Finland should have gone a lot differently than it went. There's a lot of different historical moments that Russia experienced that should have gone differently if the calculation was as simple as, look at the spreadsheet, there's more Russians than this group of people. And you could do this not only for Russia, you could do this with any other number of wars. Afghanistan, Vietnam, painful memories that us Americans at home know of. But I think it's easier for people to accept doing nothing if they tell themselves that the victory of an occupying force that wants to annihilate an identity of people, it makes it a lot easier to swallow, right? And I'm not even saying that they're doing it disingenuously. I just think that it's genuinely something to help the medicine go down. We also got no practical option today for security guarantees outside of proposals from those who support Ukraine to reinforce Ukraine and get them more supplies so that the Russians have no choice but to accept an arrangement where they can't invade Ukraine again. And I appreciate Lactoid's honesty. I have to give him credit that he said, look, I guess the arrangement we'd be making would not necessarily stop Russia from invading again, and they might well be able to just do that again. There would be nothing to stop them. And honestly, while we talk about we would want Trump to be hard, if they did, how confident is anyone in here that Trump would actually hold the Russians to their word? That Trump would go in there and start bombing shit, that he'd reimpose all the sanctions, even though we know that Trump is very personality-based. We know he cares a lot about personal relationships, and I think his personal relationship with Putin matters a lot to him too, and I just find it hard to see him going back and trying to enforce anything, and I think that's why he doesn't commit to security guarantees, because I think he doesn't give a fuck. Outside of that, I think the last thing I have to say is just, support Ukraine, don't support Russia, And for the love of God, please stop listening to the Russians when it comes to how they're winning or not winning. Please look at open source intel, look at Russian sources if you must to, but cross-reference them with Ukrainian sources to get an idea of how the casualties are going and how much supplies the Russians have. Because I'm telling you, Russia's not in a better position than the United States militarily right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, Dylan. Links to his stuff is in my YouTube description. Really appreciate you. I'll get to the super chats after I let everyone leave, because I've kept them here too long. But Lactoid gets the last word. Go ahead, Lactoid.
Thank you. I am Lactoid. You can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I actually do think that this was a productive conversation. I didn't go into this conversation expecting to change the minds of our opponents here in this debate. Not only because it's normally the case that you don't change the minds of your opponents during a public debate, but also I'm not sure I would want to because of the relatively draconian laws in Ukraine against disagreeing with the government narrative. We all know what happened to Coach Red Pill. By negatively covering Ukraine, he was arrested and in prison, where he later died, and that has yet to be investigated. He died of pneumonia. Absolute tragedy. And again, for those of you in Ukraine, maybe you should just be sticking with the government
I had
narrative that
such
you're
gay
clinging
loving sex with Zelensky, and I'm going to do it again in front of his wife.
Now,
I'm going to go there in a month, and I'm
Sure.
not going to be arrested.
Are
so
you
you
initiating
have-
that
this
I'm
is my
lying
closing.
because
This
I
is
will
my
be
closing,
arrested?
guys.
He's spewing lies, Wick. It's like,
This is my
It is
closing.
his closing.
Yeah, I get it.
His
I'm
closing.
sorry, I just couldn't help
all
myself.
good, Wick.
I'm a
My bad.
bastard.
I'll do this.
So
Go
Ukraine
ahead.
absolutely has media bans in terms of heavy restrictions that even the EU has criticized. They have language bans. They've banned Russian cultural
No, we
product
don't.
in Kiev.
It's just lying.
Okay, okay.
will-
I'm sorry, but
I will-
Lactoid does get to give his closing. We can't interrupt him. I'm sorry. Lactoid, go ahead.
Yeah, they absolutely have. Again, you guys can just look this up. They absolutely have in Kiev, for example. There is a ban on Russian language cultural product. That was in 2023. You can go ahead and look it up yourself.
Look it up.
Mercado said feelings without
Look it up.
facts. I cited a tremendous amount of facts, including specific articles from a different country's constitutions, and the only response to this, which we've seen a little bit during my closing, was nothing but constant interruptions. In a 3 versus 2, almost a 4 versus 2 at points, the interruptions were typical of this kind of conversation. None of them were actually interrupting to engage with the veracity or the truth of anything that I was saying. They were simply throwing in allegations of propaganda while dodging the actual questions of the truth value. I need people here to recognize the sleight of hand that's happening when they do this. They don't want you to engage in specific points. They don't want you to do your own research. They want you to listen to their anecdotal experience and their disinformation, and they want to dismiss any challenge with ad homs and non sequiturs. I was accused of lying and spreading propaganda, yet at no point on anything that I said was I disproven. The only real point came from Dylan, which was that what would prevent Ukraine from being invaded again, which apparently comes from putting them in NATO, and yet Russia apparently is strong enough to be planning to invade all of NATO. This apparent hypocrisy, I think, proves that they want their cake and they want to eat it too. What I would say is, whenever you have one side trying to shut down the other side with nothing but ad homs, non sequiturs, not trying to engage in the actual truth value of anything, that should be a red flag that perhaps they are not to be trusted. Do your own research. Even Wikipedia research on this would disprove a lot of the things that they're saying. Support peace and let's stop death together. Thank you.
Okay. Descriptions in the channel. Gang, again, if you enjoyed
Русский язык
content,
не запрещен. Он не запрещен. I said that Russian is not prohibited and nothing of Russian culture is prohibited. Russian propaganda is prohibited.
You
Sorry.
should go outside
Have
sometime,
to-
Lactoid.
Yeah, you should go outside. Yeah. Oh, by the way, come to Ukraine. That would be nice.
You can go with
I'll
me.
give you a
Lactoid,
tour.
I'll go with you.
That's
Lactoid,
kind
I'll
of a
take you.
threat after what you guys did to Coach Red Pill. I don't want to go to Ukraine. They're going to kill me.
No, don't worry. Don't worry.
Lactoid, can I
Nobody's
ask you a
killing
question?
Oh my
They're
God.
going to kill me. They're going to kill
So
me.
you like
After
Coach
this
Red
debate,
Pill?
if you like, I'll keep
Come
this
on.
going, right?
after
Just don't
this
be Coach
debate,
Red
they're
Pill
going to
is one
fucking
way.
kill me. I'm not going to go to
Just
Ukraine. Are you kidding me?
Lactoid, just don't be Coach Red Pill, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just don't be Coach
sure.
Red Pill,
That's
you'll
easy.
live.
I would go to
Yeah.
Ukraine.
What was he
46
arrested
a
for?
day.
Wait, what was he arrested for again?
Well, a few things. Number
Oh,
one,
spreading
reporting
propaganda,
on
was
of
it?
his
What did
neighbors
they
or
cite?
Artillery
can I-
positions.
that you didn't even let. Well, I thought you said I was interrupting.
Yeah, you were the whole fucking debate. What are you
care.
talking about?
Do you
Well,
want to
you did- well,
film
then I
the
tried to
guys
answer
did
and you
interrupt
just yell over
the fuck
me.
out of
That's
him.
Russian
You didn't let him
propaganda?
finish.
Yeah, lying should be interrupted. You shouldn't allow lies.
Well, if you guys gonna
Yeah.
be here, I'll just read the super chats because why not? Fuck it. $5 from Justice35 says, Wick, please donate my chat money to Anna and the troops. Well, I gave the link
Thank you.
to everyone. I don't know.
By the way, I appreciate really the conversation that is happening at all, because people haven't been talking about us for a while since Gaza, and Israel and Palestine happened. So I do appreciate the conversation. The fact that I'm extremely dejected and kind of over the entire thing, you can probably understand why. That because I heard all of this million times from Russians and from fucking Americans that repeat Russian shit all the time. And do your research, like Lactoid said, because it will show what we are saying, not whatever the fuck he's saying. And yeah, I really appreciate the Wick and especially Dylan and Andrew for sticking by us despite their government that isn't. And I can't wait to see you. Actually,
I will
in
have to at
Ukraine.
some point.
Yeah,
I
sorry,
hate
that's
you,
that's
Lactoid,
Wick, you can come with me. Wick, let's go on a convoy. Go.
Lactoid, because I think that we can have a conversation about this, just us. Maybe a moderator, right? But I think you're just demonstrably wrong on some of the points. But as a moderator, I couldn't
Which
really
point?
jump in. Okay, so first of all, the Euromaidan coup revolution, I think that Dylan was exactly right when you say you were misframing it. You're leaving out a lot of context and information that does change how these things go,
How does
right?
it
Like the
change it?
fact that they did break the Constitution,
Wait,
fair,
which
what enough,
article?
but
Which article did they
why did
break?
they break the Constitution would be the
Which
question.
article did they
And do you
break?
think that all Article 108 or 1.108 or what the fuck?
Missile,
Oh,
my
wait, wait.
way.
Oh,
I
hold on. You're
apologize.
saying the Euromaidan
Yes, the
protesters broke the
Euromaidons
Constitution.
did.
Okay,
But
sure.
why is the question? Like, why did they do that? Did they just do it for funsies?
Oh.
Did they have a reason? And the question becomes, is there ever a reason to violate the Constitution? I think even you would agree under certain conditions that yes,
Under
it would
certain
be
conditions, I understand.
acceptable and
But then
moral.
again,
And
if
then,
you violate the
hold on, let me
Constitution,
finish, right?
Oh my
Because
God,
you
dude.
asked why you were wrong, and you got to let me finish. See,
that doesn't make me wrong.
Notice the people who are trying to interrupt, right? To try to interrupt as they're saying. Notice how they don't want to engage, right? Now, notice how,
Are
and
you
whenever
moving on
I'm
to a
trying to
second
tell the
point?
truth,
Are you
they're
moving
trying
on
to
to Are you moving on
interrupt
to a second
me
point, Wick?
while I'm making my point because they don't want you
Is
to.
it a
They
separate
don't want
point?
you. They don't want you to hear it. Okay? They don't want you to hear it because
Don't
if you heard
pretend
it,
like the
you'd
whole
be
fucking
able
debate
to
that just
know why
happened
they
didn't
were
just happen,
wrong.
Wick.
And
This
you
is
understand why
ridiculous.
he's interrupting me right
You're
now,
the moderator
right?
of the debate,
You
Wick. What are you
complained about
talking about?
because the debate's over. I closed it. We had the closings. Now you guys are just fucking here in my house.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to read super chats and you're interrupting me. You can stay. You're all cool, but here we are. But I forgot because you fucking interrupted me and I lost my train of thought. So let's keep going with the super chats. £10 from Rizius. Is it true that many of the cost that is given to Ukraine is from form of out-of-date arms? Can there be a case made that giving arms to Ukraine is a good method of disposing U.S. military junk?
I mean, there's been some discussion about this. For example, Australia was going to decommission like 31 Abrams tanks, and the Ukrainians were like, "Dog, what? You're just going to destroy them? Give it to us." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." And there's been a lot of examples like this, where it would actually be technically more expensive for the government to destroy the gear than it would be to ship it over. And in instances like that, when you don't send over aid, I think it has to either be out of spite or fear. But I mean, there's not enough of that to just support Ukraine. They have to have, because eventually you're going to run out of old gear. You can't just continue to have this, hand-me-down program like they're their little brother and they're growing into your clothing. But it has been one of the main ways that gear's been sent over. Most of the gear that I've seen, like American gear, is stuff that my grandpa would have used in Vietnam. It's very, it's kind of mind-boggling.
Also, there's a lot of
yeah.
benefit,
Well-
if I may, there's a lot of benefit to giving arms, even modern arms, to Ukrainians so that we can see them in action and based on their performance in actual hostile environments under certain conditions, we get that intel back and we're able to iterate and make our weapons better, stronger, and better use our tactics and our doctrine in order to how to use what we have in a
Are we
more
just
efficient manner. We can do
offloading
that.
old shit and then subsidizing weapons manufacturers? I mean, isn't that really, like from
A lot of
everything
it was
I
that.
understand,
Base,
weapons manufacturers are
military-industrial
having like
complex
record-setting
base,
profits
but
because of this conflict. And at the same time, they're having a very difficult time arming the Ukrainians, which is
Okay,
what they're
Smoker,
trying.
I got a question. I got
What
a
they're
good
trying to
faith
do.
question for you. I got a good faith question for Smoker. Okay, so the taxpayers paid for all those weapon systems that are old now; they're outdated, right? And Ukraine's getting those. What do you think would be a better use? Good faith. I'm not trying to get you anything. Just honestly, other than giving it to a country that really needs them, right? Like an old Humvee, which we're now using JLTVs, for example. Older systems, right, that are now outdated. What would you rather do with taxpayer paid weapon systems that already exist?
I don't, to be honest with you, I mean, I would imagine that there's some potential for them to either be repurposed or possibly the materials could be used for other things, refurbishing weapons that we need for other conflicts throughout the world. It's not like we're not involved in other conflicts, by the way. Those weapons could have potentially lots of uses, but it's not that I'm against giving Ukrainians old stuff. It's just this kind of sleight of hand where I feel like we're saying, well, we have to arm the Ukrainians because democracy and all this stuff. And then it's like there are for-profit companies in America raking in shitloads of taxpayer money, benefiting from this conflict. And then in practice, they offload their old shit to Ukraine and manufacture new stuff. And you have people like Mitch McConnell saying like, well, we're expanding our industrial base, which is somewhat true, even though like a very small percentage of Americans actually work in the weapons manufacturing industry. So it's very little benefit to us, and there's people making lots of money on it. In fact, there was a report in CNN which argues that the for-profit military industry is part of the reason why we're not able to produce as much as Russia or the same pace as they are.
That's true, by the way. I agree with that.
Mhm.
This
I
would
would
be
have
one
to
of the
agree
few
as well.
areas. This is one of the few areas I think I'm going to find like 80% agreement with non-smoker here, which is a blessing. I guess the clouds have parted. I do think the way that it worked was we would fight guys in caves, right? And usually to fight a guy, and I'm just trying to be blunt. I don't want to fight guys in caves, and so we'd use a lot of high precision rockets. But you don't need a huge supply of those because you don't need to throw 10, 20, 30 of those. You throw one big one at that target. And so these companies have been producing like 1,000 to 2,000 rockets or something a year to basically be like have maybe half of them used, then half of them put into storage, and then all of a sudden you need 12,000, right? And so the reason they weren't producing 12,000 is these companies did not want to have a bunch of stock that they were going to have to destroy and not have to sell, and then they would not have a profit. And so they were concentrating on making extremely high-tech precision weapons that were mostly used for the war on terror in small supplies but at high price tags.
Mhm.
And so this is how we had very advanced technology in the United States. As much shit as the F-35 gets, the F-35 is an extremely advanced aircraft. It just costs a lot more than maybe it should have. But what that means is when you're facing an army that has 20,000 artillery shells compared to your 1,000 production, then you have a problem. And so it is true that I think that by the nature of the consolidation of all the defense companies that we used to have during the Cold War into like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, on top of this war on terror military production model to make profit, has made it that we were not ready for a large scale peer-to-peer war in Europe. That's the largest war in Europe since World War II. We were not ready for that. But then somebody would make the argument, even more reason to make these investments now and try to change the structures of our system so we could quickly produce artillery shells, etc. Which is one of the counters. But the one thing I want to throw out there is I agree that this is true, but I also want to throw out there that a lot of this investment was towards expanding production, so then we can send more aid to Ukraine. So when we're talking about these numbers, the numbers Trump threw out there, 350 billion, is bullshit, right? If we're talking about military aid that actually made its way to Ukraine, we're talking about 170 billion. Well, actually not 170 billion. We're talking maybe, if we're lucky, 100 billion, because 70 billion of that was spent on replenishing, like you were saying, American stockpiles, and a certain percentage of that was also spent on expanding. But if those go into American stocks, and then at expansion of ammunition goes, and then we don't send it to Ukraine, then it wasn't a gift to Ukraine. It was just a gift to the United States and defense contractors. I agree with you.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, there is no God but God, and Lockheed Martin is his messenger, okay? So here we go. The military-industrial complex is good. We need more of it. We need to spend more money on it, okay? I am a big believer in Pax Americana and being the world police. But that's another debate. $10 from Zetsway, your friend, Lactoid. Ukraine didn't use impeachment to remove Yanukovych. They voted on the grounds that he had withdrawn from fulfilling his constitutional duties, and there is no two-thirds requirement for that. I'm going to get through these, right? And then you can
Violates
respond
Article
to
108.
Yeah. £5 from Razius. There has been talks that the Russian economy is only alive due to the war, so why would Putin want peace? Can't this fact be used as a bargaining chip?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, one more time.
It wasn't a
Oh,
it's a £5 super chat.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
$10 for Zach. Russia has conscripted for this war as well. Convenient how Lactoid suddenly has this humanitarian pang of conscience
Literally
when it's
talking about the
something that he
Russians too.
can use to bash Ukraine. What a coincidence. $5 from Namfon. Wow, Lactoid justifies slavery, just like an evil utilitarian. $20 from Alexander Wynn. Lactoid, have you considered that not everyone who is drafted is unwilling to fight if called in, but for other reasons are unwilling to volunteer? And, well, if Anna's not here.
If they're not willing to
Valid,
volunteer,
very valid.
the fuck does that mean? You're not willing to volunteer to fight?
I wouldn't volunteer, but if someone came up to me and says, "We need you," I'd go. I can
Yeah,
understand.
there
Because
are
there's
a
a
sizable amount of
penalty
the population
associated.
that's like that.
Because
You
there's
wouldn't have
penalty
much of a
associated.
choice, Wick.
It's like
Well, that's not. There's
that's
also
not
this
it.
sense
This
of
is
like
the dumbest
I will.
point I've ever heard in my life.
Wait,
This
okay,
can't be a real point.
Lactoid.
I'm giving
Hold on, no,
Lactoid that.
if
It's
I
pretty
see,
Jesus,
I'll give you an
I'm sorry,
example.
like,
I'll give you an example.
whatever.
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example that's a little weird, but maybe it'll help get the point. Lactoid, if I saw you struggling to lift something, okay, I'm struggling to lift something like I knew you were moving, right, and you were lifting stuff, and I saw you, and I was like, oh, I really don't want to help him. But then you asked me to help, I'd be like, okay, I'll help
Yeah,
you.
that's called recruitment. So if somebody's going around
Lactoid.
recruiting people, that's fine. But
You're-
conscription
Lactoid.
is when you force them when they don't want to go.
You're the one with the American flag behind you, dude. Like it's like you're projecting this, but then you wouldn't actually do any of it or like what it's called.
Yeah,
Have
take
you-
that
have you
flag,
said-
I
bro.
will.
You don't want to
Okay,
kill for it.
I'm sorry. Like I have conversations with people. It is
Yeah, you
true.
have to
Wait,
sometimes.
There's like some people, and I think they're coping to me when they say, "Well, if they call upon me, then I'll go," because they're saying like, "Yeah, well, I'm patriot." But there's other people I talk to, and I can see it in their eyes when they say like, "Look, I got 3 kids. I got to be there for them. But if they call upon me, I think it's my duty to protect my country, and I will go." And I know that might sound silly to you, but there are people that I've talked to that do believe that, and they think that basically they're in line. There's a lottery system, and they hope they don't get picked. But if they do, well, it's not unfair. It would be unfair for me to force that on some other father. Now that I have been called up, it's my responsibility. There are people that have that mentality. You can call it silly, but
And I'll be
It's
honest too. I'll admit my bias because I served in the military and I have that inner experience. I've been out of the military for a long time now, but I'll admit my bias to it, and I feel that it is a responsibility if you're called upon, or if the government comes to you like, hey, we need you to defend our country. Like you got to, especially as a man, in my opinion.
So
that
wait,
you should respond and do this.
Was the draft for Vietnam justified in your view?
No, bad. We shouldn't have. We should have done.
So
we should
there
have
are instances where it's not like you might be called upon to
comparing-
serve
It
the
was
force,
in
but
World War
So
II.
it's a fake. It's a fake. The comparison to Vietnam's not the same. Where we
no,
said
no,
that
I'm
was
not saying it's
American.
I'm not saying it's the same as Ukraine. I get Ukraine's
Both
need
relied on
to
domino theory,
conscript
though, by the way.
soldiers, but I'm curious. Just in your view, are there instances where conscription drafts are wrong?
Yeah, like Vietnam, America.
I got you.
Russia?
Okay.
There are
Can I ask you one
instances
other
where
question?
Russian, yeah, Russia's
Yeah,
conscripts
there
for
is
the war.
there is
I'm
an
sorry.
instance where
I
it's,
apologize. I left because ballistic strikes. So
we do have a
yeah.
super chat for you though. If
We
you're
do?
here for a minute, how
Thank you.
popular
Yeah,
is
I heard
Zelensky?
they blown up.
Yeah, this is to you. How popular is Zelensky at this point in Ukraine?
Well, he was still relatively popular, like 50 something percent. I'd say most people are either pro Zelensky as a potential candidate when elections, can potentially happen, or they are Zelensky. They are two like most popular candidates in Ukraine right now. But after the shit fest, though. In the Oval Office, his approvals fucking skyrocketed. I talked with almost all of my prolific Zelensky haters out there, and they're all are standing him now and supporting him because he didn't quote unquote sell us out. So if Trump did anything, I'd say he boosted Zelensky's approval pretty high. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's up to interpretation, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is that his approval is very much has been increased by recent events.
And this is aside, but this is something that I just heard today, right? And you maybe can confirm, maybe not, maybe you don't know. But one of the things that I heard today was that Trump had been sending people to approach dissidents
Oh
or
yeah,
other
yeah.
parties in Ukraine. Has that been
Actual
something you've
coup,
seen?
by the way.
Is that something
Yes.
you've seen?
Apparently, they have been approaching. They really try to get rid of him, obviously, because he's not playing the ball. He's not submitting to their demands. So they're tried apparently to approach Tymoshenko and Poroshenko. Poroshenko used to be a president of Ukraine, but Tymoshenko was the one who lost to Yanukovych during the elections when Yanukovych was elected. So basically, Trump kind of like approached the least popular people alive in Ukraine, which I made a joke on Twitter like that they're not digging the rare earth in minerals, but they're digging the corpses of basically political dead politicians in Ukraine, because Tymoshenko is like one of the least popular people alive. And even for Tymoshenko and Poroshenko, despite being opponents of Zelensky, said that they do not support elections right now because it's not against our constitution, basically.
Yeah,
and you have to lift martial law to have elections right now. So I don't know how successful that will be, but maybe they will dig up Yanukovych or some shit. I don't know at this point.
that is something. It is something I saw reported, and I'm just wondering if you can confirm that. And fair enough.
Yeah, that seems to be true.
Last
Seems to be, at least.
super chat, $5, non-smoker. When you look at the invaded and say they're bad for defending themselves, you are in fact pro-Russian, praying.
I didn't fucking say that.
Any orcs.
Shut up with that Russian propaganda.
But I
non-smoker.
never said that. I never said they were bad for defending themselves. In fact, I explicitly said they have the right to defend themselves multiple fucking times.
Just reading the $5 super chat, buddy. Okay.
When he says that, that's Russian propaganda, by the way. It's not true.
Okay.
Don't
Anything
believe it.
else before I
No,
just have
you
to
are the
go?
Russian propaganda, not him.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
I'd
you're the
I'd
Russian
label you
propaganda.
more than non-smoker.
You guys
are
It
the
seems
Russian
like non-smoker
propaganda.
at least wants to talk.
The Russians
I don't
are
think
in
you
the
do
room
that.
right now.
him.
Lactoid
Not-
would capitulate
yeah,
to an invader.
through you, but not through him.
Okay.
Non-smoker, you
gang,
got more points out of this
this
one, I
has
tell you
been,
that.
Ricardo, have you
This
said
has
anything
been
smart ever? Just out of
lovely.
curiosity.
Every day at
Are you sure
3
about that?
o'clock
Are you sure
Eastern
about
Time,
that?
Mercado
Okay.
Media. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you guys are having fun.
I'm off
glad
on
you guys
Sundays.
love to talk.
No, why not?
I'll follow all these people. I love them. Next week we're gonna have a debate on probably conscription at this point, right? And we're also going to debate on the
boy.
Department of Education. And I'm going to be debating someone on Rumble apparently at 11:30 at night on Ukraine. He said that if I loved Ukraine so much, I should go fight for it. And
The
I
best
think that's the
argument.
silliest argument.
That's a classic. That's a classic.
We're going to talk about
What's
it.
Rumble though? It's like a
another
platform. Or...
service. It's
I'm sorry. I'm just a Ukrainian,
It's all good. It's all good. So
Um,
that should be a fun discussion. I'm going to ask him why he supports Putin over the Constitution, and it'll be that kind of show. But okay, we're going to rate out. Who are we rating into?
Well,
Dylan, are you still streaming after this?
I'm probably gonna end after this.
Oh, okay.
This went a little longer than I expected.
Longer than I expected to. Okay.
it
Well, I
is
guess
4 in the
Blacktoad, are you
morning.
going to still stream
I'd
after
say.
this?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, you can send me your viewers, and then I can send them to somebody of my choice.
Okay, so you're not. Okay, fair enough.
I'm giving you options. I'm giving you options.
We'll just go into Nina then, and I'll see you guys. I'm not streaming tomorrow. I'll see you guys Monday.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Back to
See
being
ya.
bombed. And bye.
Bye.
Bye. Wait, bye, all of you. Okay. It's got like
Bye.
5 seconds left before it pops off. Okay, now we're done. Did you have fun?
Yeah, I'm still streaming, so I'm gonna be running out in a second though. But I'll catch you later, brother.
Okay. It is about how I expected it to go.
It went. It happened. It went.
I hope you enjoyed it
I
and
did.
made some money.
I did.
So,
Good. I'm
Good.
glad.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yep, peace. Blowing up the picture. Whoa, that's too much. That's too much. It's too much. Let's go down a little bit smaller. There we go. It's perfect. Look at that. All right, everybody. How y'all doing? That went about as expected. I got interrupted more than I thought I would, though. I'm gonna be honest. I thought I was I thought it was like I knew I was going to be cut off a lot. I didn't know it was going to be that bad. Like it was like every single time. And so did what I could. Obviously, in those kind of situations, you just got to call it out. You just got to make it very clear what's happening. And I think I did a decent job at doing that, especially at the end, because especially when they were cutting me off during my closing, which is just wild multiple times. But I meant every word that I said, right? I meant every single word that I said. You can research, you can go back through the debate. If you find a statement that I've said that was incorrect, like a lie, or sorry, even if just find something incorrect, right? And then look, because if you say something incorrect, it's not necessarily a lie, right? You could just be mistaken if we're going to look at things charitably. But I've done a decent amount of research on this. Obviously, I think more than anybody else in the panel, frankly speaking. And if you go back to anything that I said and you can find like a mistake, something that I said that was incorrect, just factually, bring it to my attention. Bring it to my attention, and I will review. And if you're right, you're right. And then I'll even discuss it with you in Discord if you'd like. I will go through anything that I've said during this debate. I mean it. And if you point out a specific area that I misstated something, or I'm under the delusion of Russian propaganda, then I'll be I'll be open to changing my mind. I'm always open to changing my mind. Remember, you can find panels of me. You can find panels of me being super pro Ukraine. That was probably about like a year or two ago. You can find those. You can find me being overtly and rabidly in favor of Ukraine. It was people bringing me facts and evidence that changed my mind into, well, actually, maybe this is more complex than we were first thinking about. Maybe peace is more of a actual realistic solution here. Maybe it's not just like, well, there's a psychopath that just invades. No, maybe it's actually, well, this country, there's a reason this country acted this way. I'm not saying it's like necessarily justified, but it explains. That's why I said before, like there's a difference between justification and explanation. And if something explains something, then you can predict, right? You can predict what might happen in the future. And I think the facts that I went through really did a good job at doing that. And I was happy that I was able to get that out. You could tell they wanted to get away from the Euromaidan topic just because I was citing very specific instances. I think it was Mercado who said, yeah, like the shit only started happening in January. Nothing happened before. Shit was happening in November. Dylan Burns said the police like cracked down on the protesters in November. That's true. There was clashes on both sides, just like I said in November of 2013. 100%. That's what happened. On Twitter, yeah, I saw that, Feder. On Twitter, Pisco said I was getting mogged. He's just a partisan hack at this point. Like if you just look at his tweet history, he's like in like just that's just how he operates. Like he's very much like team games. On my Twitter, like yeah, like I focus on things that I have values over more. But I will admit, like, well, that's a bad thing. Oh shit, like tariffs are bad. Like Trump is wrong on doing this. That's dumb, right? Like this person won this debate. I even said, what's it? Brits even when it comes to like not really debate performance, I guess it's kind of a debate performance. Brit's performance on the response to the State of the Union, I think, was worse than Slotkin's. I do. I think the Democrat Slotkin did a better job. Did she do a good job? No. She did a better job than fucking Brits. Man, that last Day of the Union with Brit, that was cringe as fuck. That was incredibly cringe. And I'll just come out and say that, right? But there's the live and learn folks are just incapable, whether it be through like some kind of mental block or whether it be just a genuine like goal propaganda, like to move elections. They just have a complete inability to like evaluate discussions and facts honestly. They have to engage in the sort of partisan hackery that we see very vividly. So everything has to go with the partisan warfare. Everything. Anyway. They need to be willing to admit the facts of the matter, then proceed with justification. True. The thing is, they just didn't know the facts. That's the problem, right? I mean, we have somebody who's been in Ukraine for years. We have Mercado, who says he's been in Ukraine for at least 5 times. We have Ukrainian Anna, who lives there and took part in Euromaidan, and none of them could refute any of the facts that I was saying. The only thing that like was like you had Mercado and Burns that were scoffing, like that's what they were doing. And then Anna was attempting to, I guess, refute what I was saying by saying, well, like I was there, I had like the anecdotal experience. This is not what was happening. And that's a very weak response, I think, because anecdotal experience doesn't trump documented evidence, right? It's maybe where you specifically were, there weren't there, it was a different story. but there are places other than where you are specifically. Just because it's cold where you are doesn't mean global warming isn't happening up north, right? You have to be able to look at the evidence of a situation and come to rational conclusions by fully evaluating the evidence and then using logic to come to some kind of conclusion. And sometimes the conclusions aren't going to fit your partisan narrative. As you know, would it be cool if America was always in the right and we're going to get a cool little satellite state like Ukraine? Yeah, I guess it'd be there's some benefits there, but you can't just start making up facts. And then when somebody else confronts you with the facts, then just start saying, well, that's just disinformation. That's just a lie. They just don't want to. They just don't want you to engage in the actual topic. That's ultimately what this is about. What else? I'm Roland. I'm talking about. So Britt was the Republican lady who responded to Biden's State of the Union, and then Slotkin was the Democrat lady who responded to. And I'm saying lady, they're senators. Was the Democrat who responded to Trump's State of the Union. Both of them were trash in terms of their responses. Slotkin was better than Britt. Slotkin was better than Britt. The Republican senator was bad. She was bad. She was not good. Very cringe. Very bad. And the cope is they can't see Ukraine losing the war. I think that there's some part of them that knows it. It's like a morale thing, especially the people who are there. They're like, oh, you gotta fucking support the war. You gotta support the war. Like we're gonna win. We're gonna win. If I believe I can. I believe I can. I believe I can. Like the little engine that could. Um, it's typical with every war. The Russians downplay their casualties. The Ukrainians downplay their casualties. At the beginning, the Russians were like, "Yeah, we're kicking ass." When like the starting point of this war, the Russians bungled that shit so fucking hard. That was just a textbook tactical catastrophe that the Russians engaged in. They completely overestimated themselves. They completely underestimated the Ukrainians, and they totally just fucked up like almost everything, and just from a tactical point of view. So when the Russians are saying like you just can't take their word for it, right? When the Russians are saying, "Oh yeah, we're doing fine," no, you're not doing fine. Now, based on like independent research and independent reporting from the front line, the Russians are doing better than the Ukrainians are. It's just a fact. You can look it up. Look at the land gains. Look at the manpower issues. The Ukrainians are relatively well equipped right now. What they're missing is people, and the Russians have some momentum. And once they get past some of the last strongholds, like in Pokrovsk and the rest of the Donetsk region, they're going to start getting into less easily defended area. So it's very possible that you're going to start seeing an exponential land gains if the Russians start making it past that point. We'll see. War is hell, and you know, it needs to end, man. Sound like a fucking hippie, but I'm just saying, like, war is hell, and we should be doing what we can do to end it. And I think Trump has done a good job compared to Biden, at least, or compared to what Kamala would do in terms of getting this thing wrapped up. Has Trump been perfect on it? No. There's critiques you can make about that White House press conference with Zelensky. I think Zelensky made some critical mistakes there as well. But yeah, war isn't fair. I mean, true, but it's also I think worthwhile to like look at the background of wars and try to look again for explanation, even if not justification in every instance, but explanation. You can make a strong case for the justification of the Russian seizure of Crimea and their activity in the Donbass. I don't think it justifies it, but it explains, like some of the background there explains what happened in 2022. And again, if you're looking at like predicting what a power is going to do, trying to get explanations about their behavior can be incredibly valuable. Because otherwise, if you have no explanation for the Russian behavior, you are sort of sat in this corner where you're thinking like, well, Russia's just going to invade anybody near them. They're going to roll into China if they get the opportunity, right? I mean, look at them. They're just invading everybody around them. And then you start digging into each conflict and you begin to realize like there are very specific geopolitical reasons for all conflict, including the ones that Russia's involved in, including the ones that America is involved in, including all of this. These invasions don't just fall out of the sky. They can be predicted by looking at in a real way what countries are looking for and what a country identifies as its critical interests. And if we look at what Russia's doing, a lot of the history of this conflict explains what they're doing, right? Russia actually shoots their own soldiers if they retreat. Um, I During the World War II, they did for sure. You got to be really skeptical as to some of the partisan news that's coming out about like the Russian soldiers. Like I've seen somewhere it's like, yeah, they're like charging the enemies with pitchforks. They don't have any guns. They have nothing. They're it's like, no, hold on. They're a conventional military. Yes, they fucked up in the beginning, but they are a conventional military with missiles and rockets and drones. And here's the thing. Again, this sort of weird like have your cake and eat it too position where it's like, yeah, look how pathetic they are. They're on camels. They have these rusted weapons. They're charging with pitchforks. But if we don't stop them here, they're going to invade all the way to Spain. Okay? Because I don't know if you guys knew this, the Polish are uniquely weak to pitchforks. They are uniquely weak to camels. For some reason, they do not know how to deal with it's like no, like the reason why like both can't be true at the same time. Either Russia is this contentious foe that is able to put up a fight, which they are, um, and that's why you want to join NATO because you're scared of them. And other NATO countries don't really have to be scared of Russia in the same way because they're already part of NATO. Um, or they're pathetic and you can beat them no problem. One of the two. You can't have both. Zelensky was an absolute badass at the start of the invasion. I don't care what people say about him. In some regards, he was, in terms of just like bravery, I think. So it's fair. Trump's leverage on Russia is small, if any, because the Ukraine war has the quality of war scenario to drag on and sink Trump optically. Um, sure, yeah. I don't know how much leverage. Well, I don't know how much leverage anybody has in Russia right now. I mean, I think that the Russians are making a calculation, which is like, yeah, we're if we launch this war with very specific goals, and if we get them and we can release all the sanctions, then we're good. I think that's what and they're not going to get everything that they could possibly get, right? Because I mean, if they have to fight it all the way through and get all the way to Kiev, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see perhaps like some other small border adjustments, but you could also see Ukraine be absorbed into the Eurasian Economic Union. And if they're absorbed into the Eurasian Economic Union, they're never joining the EU. They are now like completely and forever in economically and militarily, because Russia could force them into SISTO as well. They're forever economically and militarily within the Russian sphere, which the Russians would like very much, I'm sure. They're making slow gains using the North Koreans as meat shields. Yeah, the gains are relatively slow, but remember, Ukraine's a big country. She also brushed off Crimea vote as maybe they voted to be independent in 1991, but I didn't care. Yeah, you guys should look into that. They had a referendum to be autonomous, and it was successful. And the Ukrainian central government just ignored it and said, "No, fuck you. We're not going to follow that. We're just going to, And the Crimeans were pissed off about that for a long time. You can look at the polls. Crimeans did not want to be part of Ukraine, even before the invasion and after. If Pisco is such a great lawyer, why is Lecture fan at the top list of the lawyers in his field? But he is not. I mean, I'm sure he's probably a decent lawyer. He's just an asshole. So, and a lot of lawyers are assholes. Just I know this from being in the field. I'm telling you, like lawyers, I say this a lot. There's a certain kind of person that being a lawyer attracts. Very similar to how there's a certain kind of person that a police officer attracts. Where, yeah, not everybody's bad, and I'm saying this as a lawyer. Not everybody's bad, but you tend to get very type A argumentative people, and some part of that, like some portion of them, are like real assholes. But they could be good lawyers. Based on my conversations with Pisco, I got no doubt that he is a lawyer. He's just again just an asshole. Andrew has brain damage from. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna read that. Jebtan, you lied when you said you're a nice guy. You don't even eat pussy. Fair. Best argument I've heard this entire debate. Feder, you say, and there's bits here. I'm pretty sure I thanked you, but if I didn't, thank you. Good job, Lackey. I still disagree with you, but you did well, and they drooled indignantly at you. Can't believe Pisco is drooling on Twitter too. Really appreciate the bits. Thank you. Really appreciate you guys. You guys are great. They can't bring themselves to concede the facts. True. Lactoid, you're so wrong, but you held frame. So W. Oh, you guys are. See, you guys can be mean to me, but when you're nice to me, it feels good too. It really does. I think I have a very good mix in my community of people who are really nice to me, but then people who are also willing to be really mean to me if I deserve it. And sometimes I do. I'm not going to say that I come out ahead on every single conversation. There's no way, right? Everybody's going to have down days. There's some days I just feel exhausted, especially if I've been up late or if there's like a really busy work day or something along those lines. But I think today I had enough energy to really bring it in some regards, and I thought it went well. Putin agrees to peace meeting with Zelensky. Putin Really, I think the biggest impediment is Zelensky in 2022. I said this during the debate. Made a declaration saying that they would not negotiate with Putin, and so Putin is saying like basically for a while now, saying like, yeah, we'll negotiate, but Ukraine can't negotiate because they have a law saying they can't negotiate with Putin, and Putin is our head of state, and he will be there at the negotiations, and any kind of negotiations will have to be um, uh, agreed to with him because he's the president. Reasonable. Lactoid, they're still talking over you. Yeah, I'm guessing I'm getting back towards the actual debate. Yeah. I'm gonna scroll down, see what I missed here. Let's see. Putin might be looking for an exit where he can maintain power. Maybe. Burns just disregards Putin, yet he has a methodological, methodical, understanding of the region's history, its cultures. The only real leverage they have is sanctions. Yeah, sanctions are big leverage. Keep that in mind, right? Like lifting sanctions is a big deal for Russia. It is. There's certain red lines they will. I mean, the Russians went through hell in the early '90s, and they've proven that you can tolerate. Like the Russian people will tolerate a lot of shit and still keep the leadership that they have in charge. Um, so Non-Fawn, what's up, dude? I do think you're mostly wrong, but you did a really good job calling them out on their lack of engagement sometimes and showcasing that to the audience. Thank you, Non-Fawn. Non-Fawn, you are one of my more favorite lefties because when I have a conversation with you and there's like a point that's like obviously incorrect or whatever, you're just like, yeah, that's not the case, but and then you'll make a point that makes sense too. So the fact that you give and take, I think, is a big ups to you. Also, we agree on tariffs. I mean, I know that's just tariffs are taxes, and taxes are bad. Sorry. I know Trump loves tariffs, but this is one of my biggest beefs with him. And I've said this. I've said this on Twitter. I've said this on panels. Not a fan. Tariffs are bad, and conscription is bad, and both should only be used in the absolute most necessary of circumstances, which this isn't. It's just not. Sorry. Anyway, for those of you who I haven't had a chance to thank for giving me bits and subs and all that good stuff, thank you so much for all of that. For those of you who are watching, thank you so much. For those of you who gave a new follow, I got a couple new followers today. Really appreciate that. Welcome to my channel and to this community. I hope you found the debate insightful. I hope you found it entertaining. If you have anything to say to me about just, you want to fact check anything, you want to kind of just have a conversation, I'm usually a pretty easy person to reach sometimes. I can be a little bit difficult if I'm working or if I'm like, because sometimes I'll be like in a chat room and then I'll be like, talking while I'm like doing something with my emails or something. And so if that's the case, I mean, I hang on a Wix server too. If you're like Wick, you can go to his server. I'm a mod there. And so I have, some connection with that community as well. And then I have my own server, Anti-Communism United. Both tariffs and conscription are slavery. True, but I wasn't going to get into the whole tariffs or slavery part quite yet, because that that's a whole nother conversation. That's like deep libertarian philosophy. It's much easier to make the connection, I think, between conscription and slavery. Much easier to make the connection between conscription and slavery because you're literally like, you go do this job against your will. Anyway, today is what? Thursday. If you guys liked what you saw today, please consider giving me a follow and sticking around. Drop the Discord link. Technically, my Discord isn't listed as a public, and Discord, which is good for a couple of reasons. But that also means that the link isn't permanent. So you're gonna have to like get a link from the server and post it in the side chat. And if you could do that for me, Roland, just because I would have to like turn off my screen here because I'm actually streaming through my Discord, that'd be great. Technically, you're a mod on my Discord. I don't know if you're a mod on my Twitch chat. I love taxes because they are slavery. That is a take. That is a take. I don't know if it's a good take, but it is one. It is We're gonna raid on out into a good friend of mine, Admiral Gibbs. Looks like he's collaborating with our good friends Pentuple TV and Average Debate Enjoyer. Give him some love, and I will see you guys next time. Peace. Peace. Peace.